The main character of this story is known as a delinquent, who passes through dull days by fighting and getting into trouble. That was until he met a small, trembling creature. He asked what it was and where he was. Let's quickly look back. Rumors had been spreading about our boy, Manai Zero, being so scary that even the gangsters in town feared him. He always heard them talking loudly, especially about his sharp eyes. He felt frustrated that they were speaking about him so openly. Some wannabe followers of Zero tried to bully others, but Zero angrily told them to stop. He wished everyone would stop fearing him just because of his glare. His annoying followers talked about how Zero had taken down a Yakuza on his own and was the strongest high schooler. Zero found them irritating because they were using him. Just then, a soccer ball rolled past him. A kid chased after it. Zero told the kid to stop and quickly ran forward to push the kid away. Zero knew he was going to die as Truck-Kun appeared in front of him. Finally, the end of him being feared and hated had come. Zero soon woke up and realized he could still move. However, he found himself in an unfamiliar library. Suddenly, some books scattered around and a man with glasses appeared, complaining that he should have hired a janitor. For some reason, the man seemed disappointed to see a customer. Zero was used to people avoiding eye contact with him, so he asked what the place was. The librarian explained that it was a place where memories and documents were kept. Zero didn't understand and asked again what the place really was. The librarian, flustered, asked him to wait. At that moment, Zero began to remember how he had been saving a child. The librarian then found records showing that Zero had died after being run over by a truck while saving a boy. This made Zero anxious. The librarian asked if this was correct, and Zero became angry, insisting that he was alive and well. Zero then asked how the child was. The librarian explained that the child had only suffered scratches, but Zero had been crushed to death. Zero, still in disbelief, insisted he was alive, but the librarian clarified that he had ended up in a place that the living couldn't enter. Zero then realized and asked if he was in the afterlife. The librarian confirmed that it was something like that. Shocked, Zero quickly accepted it and sat on the floor, wondering what he would do next. The librarian was surprised by how easily Zero accepted the truth, as most people would have been in denial. Zero explained that his life had no meaning and dying while saving the child wasn't such a bad thing. The librarian disagreed, saying that there were people who would mourn his death. However, Zero responded that he had no one, not even his family, since they all looked at him with hatred, treating him like a monster. The librarian brought out a crystal ball and asked Zero to take a look. In the crystal ball, Zero saw his own funeral. His so-called underlings were crying their hearts out, and a little girl who called him Big Brother looked heartbroken. Confused, Zero asked what was happening. The librarian explained that although people might have feared him, they didn't actually hate him. Zero only realized this now. However, he wondered what the point was in knowing this if he was already dead and couldn't do anything about it. The librarian apologized, saying that showing him the funeral was all he could do. Despite this, Zero thanked him and asked what would happen next. The librarian then suggested reincarnating Zero in another world, explaining that it was possible because of his previous world. Realizing he would get a second life, Zero assumed that others who died before him also lived in different places. The librarian clarified that there were strict procedures, but he could use his authority to help Zero in a special way. Zero realized how high the librarian's position was. Although the librarian didn't hesitate to reincarnate him, Zero still wanted some answers. He felt like he was being pushed into reincarnation. In an instant, Zero's reincarnation was decided, a different world where spirits and magic existed. The librarian also gave Zero a skill for his new life, the ability to be loved by spirits. Zero couldn't argue further, and the librarian wished him luck. A hole opened up under Zero's foot, causing him to fall. The librarian, smiling, waved goodbye and introduced himself as the one who held the highest authority in the world after life. In simpler terms, he was basically a god. Zero was shocked and called this god stupid because he looked more like an underling due to his appearance. Zero soon found himself lying on the ground. As he watched the sky, he felt something crawling on his chest. Thinking it was a bug, he panicked and brushed it away. Looking around, he wondered where he was. He remembered being transported to another world after saving a child from being hit by a truck and meeting God afterward. He assumed he was now in that other world and started scratching his head in confusion. At that moment, he noticed more bugs around him. Afraid of being bitten, he tried to pick them up and throw them away, but then he realized they weren't bugs at all. In front of him was a trembling small creature, like a tiny human. Zero asked if it could speak and if it understood him. The small creature responded with tiny nods and shakes, and Zero found it cute. He then realized that his intense gaze might be scaring the little creature, so he covered his eyes to avoid frightening it. But then he realized he couldn't see anything himself. He removed his hands and soon discovered that the small creatures had multiplied in an instant and were now surrounding him. They all looked at him with hopeful expressions, and the tough-looking Zero blushed because he found them cute. This marked the beginning of Zero's life with the little creatures. However, he still wanted an explanation from God first. A brand new morning had arrived, and Zero woke up because of the energetic little guys surrounding him. The weather was nice as always, and it was Zero's 5th day sleeping in the cave. It was another peaceful day for fishing with the chibis. However, the spirits refused Zero's invitation and showed him some drawings on the ground. They couldn't talk, but they always found ways to tell Zero what they were thinking. Seeing many house drawings, he assumed the spirits wanted him to visit a town. Zero refused since he had already gotten used to living in a cave. The spirits insisted, and Zero eventually gave in. He felt disheartened because he had enjoyed living in the cave. Soon after, Zero wondered how far the town was since they had walked quite a distance already. Just then, Zero discovered a paved road. Suddenly, he heard a scream and saw a girl running toward him, telling him to run away too. It was Zero's first time meeting a human after practicing conversations with the spirits. He tried to say hello, but his intense gaze made the girl shriek in fear. She quickly dropped to her knees and apologized. Zero claimed he meant no harm and asked her to calm down. However, the frightened girl wasn't listening and offered him money, thinking he was trying to mug her. At that moment, 2 goblins who had been chasing the girl appeared. Zero could tell they were the bad guys. Despite the girl's warning, Zero didn't hesitate to kick one of the goblins. He then glared at the other goblin and kicked it too. The first goblin tried to pretend it was dead, but Zero didn't give it a chance to survive. The girl watched as Zero acted like a villain. She asked him to stop since the poor goblins were foaming at the mouth. The scene was too much for her and she fainted. Zero couldn't believe how annoying the girl was. Soon after, the unconscious girl started dreaming about being surrounded by spirits and wondered if they would form a contract with her. Zero couldn't believe the girl was daydreaming. He was already frustrated that he couldn't start a fire. The girl then regained her senses and realized there were spirits around. She also noticed that Zero was still with her, and after some thought, she asked for forgiveness, thinking Zero was a human trafficker. She exclaimed that she was worth nothing despite being the daughter of a wealthy family, and even tried to offer him money. Zero claimed that wasn't the case. The girl then assumed Zero had done something to her while she was unconscious. She began a monologue, calling herself filthy and saying she was a girl meant to be sold away. Zero angrily told her to be quiet. He explained that he had only taken her to safety after she lost consciousness. He said he didn't want anything to do with her and didn't care if she believed him or not. He then told her to leave. The girl tried to speak, but Zero, busy starting a fire, asked what she wanted now. The girl said she could help and pointed her fingers at the campfire. Instantly, fire appeared and she asked if it was enough. Shocked, Zero asked what trick she had used. The girl replied that she used magic, but Zero didn't know anything about it. The girl panicked and repeated the word magic 3 times. However, Zero still didn't understand. The girl became worried, meeting someone like Zero for the first time. Zero angrily asked what she was talking about. The girl then asked again if Zero really didn't know what magic was, and Zero quickly confirmed that he didn't. The girl was shocked because everyone she knew used magic. Zero said the people around him didn't. He mentioned that he had arrived only 5 days ago and didn't even know where he was. The girl assumed that Zero might have lost his memories but was too afraid to ask. Zero then told her to leave if she had something important to do. The girl offered to help and Zero noticed that she wasn't a bad person at all. Feeling happy, Zero asked if she was sure. Seeing his intimidating look, the girl asked him not to stare directly at her. Zero found her comment rude. While preparing their dinner, the girl explained that magic involved focusing one's mana and then turning it into fire or water. Zero understood the simple instructions and used the bonfire as an example. However, the girl mentioned that starting a fire was something anyone could do. Hearing this, Zero tried to extinguish the fire by shouting a chant, but nothing happened. He wondered if he was missing something, like a fighting spirit. The girl thought he was strange since anyone with magic should be able to do it. Feeling determined, Zero shouted angrily along with a fire spirit. The girl was startled by this, but still, nothing happened. Zero then calmly admitted that he didn't really need magic because he had never been able to use it in the first place. Finally, Zero asked the girl for her name and why she was alone. The girl looked troubled, so Zero told her it was okay if she didn't want to talk about it. He asked how far the town was, but instead the girl answered his first question. She explained that she wanted to form a contract with a spirit. Zero asked what a spirit and a contract were. The girl was surprised, but quickly realized that Zero wouldn't know about spirits since he didn't know about magic either. She assumed Zero had really lost his memories. Zero then told the spirits that it was time to eat, and the girl could only perceive this as Zero talking to himself. The girl explained that spirits could take on many forms, usually about the size of a hand, and their appearance depended on their attributes. She mentioned that spirits rarely appeared in front of humans, and she hoped to see one. Zero had a blank expression when he realized that the small creatures in front of him might be the spirits that the girl was talking about. He understood this when the girl couldn't see the little ones. Zero then asked why the girl wanted to form a contract with spirits, even if it meant putting herself in danger. The girl explained that spirits couldn't use magic on their own, but if they received mana from humans, they could make that person's magic much stronger. The effect was so powerful that contracting with just one spirit could greatly enhance someone's magic. If someone formed a contract with a spirit, they would be recognized as adults. With 2 spirits, they could use high-level magic, and with 3 or more, they could become a national-level great wizard. Zero called the girl a kid and asked how to form a contract with a spirit and make them appear. The girl didn't know and relied on luck. She cried, saying that many mysteries remained unknown. She exclaimed that their current location was a place where one could meet many spirits. When the girl got depressed again, Zero offered to help. The girl was surprised but immediately became scared by Zero's face. Zero felt offended but offered to accompany her, saying that traveling alone would be difficult. He mentioned that they had many companions and looked at the little ones. The girl noticed Zero talking to himself again. However, Zero wanted to explore the town first. The girl was okay with it since she planned to return soon. She expressed relief because being alone had made her feel uneasy. Zero was surprised when she thanked him. The girl then asked for his name and Zero introduced himself. She tried to introduce herself by her full name but decided to go by the name Grace instead. The two shook hands, and while Grace called him by his name, Zero struggled with her name and called her Gosu Uyake. The next morning, still mispronouncing her name, Zero told Grace that they should head straight to the town of Karato. Shortly after, Zero was mistakenly identified as a demon by the town guards. Grace explained that Zero was her companion, and although he looked scary, he was not a demon. She apologized to Zero for the strict checkpoint, explaining that monsters entering the town would be a big problem. Zero wondered if the little spirits were cute enough to get free passes. The spirits marched cutely as they entered the town of Karato. Zero then commented on how everyone's heads were colorful. Grace realized he was talking about their hair colors. Zero wondered if they were following some kind of trend. Grace remembered that Zero had lost his memories, though that was just her assumption. She then explained that hair color represented the type of magic a person specialized in. For example, someone like Grace, who had red hair, specialized in fire magic. She also pointed out that Zero must have an earth magic specialty because he had brown hair. Zero assumed that was why he couldn't use fire magic. Grace mentioned that anyone could perform a simple fire spell. Angered, Zero tried to invoke fire again with a loud voice, but Grace stopped him, warning that he might be mistaken for a fire demon because of his fierce eyes and expression. Just then, they heard an argument nearby and found an old man being kicked around by a thug. Zero noticed what was happening. Grace felt sorry for the old man and asked Zero to wait while she handled the situation. However, Zero had already left her side and she found him confronting the thug. Zero quietly walked behind the thug and bumped into him on purpose. The thug got angry, and Zero quickly punched him in the body. The thug felt the pain and dropped to his knees. Zero told him to shut up and pressed his dirty shoe against the thug's face. Grace became very worried, seeing Zero act like a crazed demon. Suddenly, a kid asked what Zero was doing to his brother. Zero then asked what they were doing to the old man. His angry glare scared the brothers and they ran away while apologizing. The old man then tried to apologize for causing trouble but froze as soon as he saw Zero's fierce eyes. For Zero, it was the same as always. Grace scolded him for hitting someone. Zero argued that the thug was the one looking for a fight and said he held back more than usual. Grace begged him to stop, saying she was worried. Zero apologized and jokingly promised to end things quickly with a final blow next time. The old man couldn't help but laugh at the two young people's banter and thanked them for saving him. The old man introduced himself as Eruji, Karato's blacksmith. He showed his products, which shocked Zero. Zero was in awe and immediately gave Eruji a nickname. Eruji told Zero to take anything he wanted as a token of thanks. However, Zero said it was a small thing and didn't feel right taking anything. Eruji was surprised, then laughed, saying it was rare to see straightforward youngsters like Zero these days. Zero didn't want to take anything, but Grace suggested he accept Eruji's offer since he still didn't have any weapons or armor. A discount would also be fine. Eruji got upset and insisted he couldn't take money from his savior. In the end, Zero agreed and thanked Eruji. Zero soon tried on some armor that wasn't heavy at all and was easy to move in. Grace said it looked good on him, and even the little ones agreed. Eruji asked about his weapon and wondered if Zero wanted an axe since he had one. Zero said he had something specific in mind, but he couldn't see it in the room. Eruji happily offered to make one for him. Without hesitation, Zero asked for an iron pipe. Grace panicked and exclaimed that a pipe wasn't a weapon at all. She couldn't believe a pipe was going to be used as a weapon. Zero explained that it was a weapon, like a bat with nails. Then he realized that this world might not have such a thing. Iruji burst out laughing and found Zero's choice interesting. He promised to make one for him quickly. Grace then decided to buy some other things and food. Zero wanted to go with her, but Grace told him to stay and wait. Zero then asked for some bandages and Grace left. Zero sat still and noticed the little creatures getting excited inside the smithy. He then saw a new tough-looking fire chibi reaching out its hand. Zero wondered if it was asking for a handshake, similar to the way E.T. did. Since coming into this new world, he had been doing the same thing with the little ones and wondered if it was a sign of friendship. He decided not to overthink it and just hoped they would all get along. The little ones continued playing around. Grace returned after shopping and Iruji kept working on Zero's iron pipe. They even had a meal together. Afterward, Iruji finished the pipe and Zero was impressed by how light it was, swinging it around. Iruji claimed it was a one-of-a-kind iron pipe. Zero then noticed Grace staring intently at the pipe. Grace asked if Iruji used mithril and Iruji casually confirmed it. Grace was shocked and Zero asked what mithril was. Grace explained that mithril was much sturdier than iron and very expensive. It was usually used to make swords and armor for holy knights. Zero, not fully grasping the importance of mithril, simply concluded that it was something expensive. Iruji then told him to take the pipe, saying he had taken a liking to him. Zero wrapped bandages around the end of the iron pipe, surprising Grace, who realized that's where the bandages were supposed to go. Before they left, Iruji asked them to visit again if they needed any repairs or new weapons, saying he had a lot of fun. Zero and Grace thanked Iruji for everything. The two soon went to a nearby inn where the hostess assumed they would share a room, but Grace asked for 2 rooms to clear up any misunderstanding. The next morning, Grace blamed Zero for doing something he shouldn't have done. Did something happen we didn't expect? Nope. Grace blamed Zero for not waking her up early, causing her to oversleep. They could have already reached the Forest of Spirits by then. Zero sighed and asked Grace if she knew the way. Grace claimed she might know, but Zero complained, realizing she didn't actually know the way. Grace then explained that spirits had strong magical power, and the place with such magic should be the forest. However, she wasn't entirely sure. Zero started to feel frustrated. Zero then asked how Grace could tell that the spirit's forest was nearby. Grace said it was just a feeling. Her answer made Zero even more frustrated. Zero then asked how to recognize the strong magical power of the spirits. Grace explained that the place would have a dense forest, cleaner water, and richer earth. Zero remembered meeting some small creatures in such a place. He thought about Grace's description of the spirits and wondered if those little creatures were actually the spirits Grace was looking for. He considered guiding her to that forest. Grace then claimed she had a hunch about the way, though she wasn't certain. Zero became more concerned and decided to take the lead. Zero told her that he knew his way around the area and instructed her to follow him. Grace refused, thinking Zero might take her somewhere private where no one could see them. Her imagination ran wild, knowing they were heading into a dim forest. Despite looking irritated, Zero asked the spirit on his shoulder to lead the way. The spirit agreed and Zero thanked it. He then told Grace that she would be left behind if she didn't follow. Grace started complaining about being left alone and Zero grew even more frustrated. He sighed, thinking about how girls could be with their changing moods. Zero remembered wanting to live in the same forest as the little ones. They soon reached the forest and Zero immediately felt at home. He was so touched that he teared up. Grace was amazed by the forest's magical power and thought it was the perfect place. She then noticed that Zero was already preparing dinner since it was getting dark and they had returned home. Grace was stunned and mentioned that they were in the spirit's forest. Zero already knew this, as Grace had mentioned it before, and she was surprised that he had known all along. Grace was confused because there was no solid proof of the forest's existence, with only vague information recorded in books. Zero claimed he had lived in the area for a while, which shocked Grace even more, prompting her to ask for an explanation. During dinner, Zero revealed to Grace that he came from another world. Though it was hard to believe, it explained the mysterious aspects of Zero, such as his strange clothing, unusual eyes, and lack of knowledge about magic and spirits. However, Grace still wondered why she couldn't see the spirits. Zero found it hard to believe that the little ones with him were actually spirits. Grace suggested that it might be due to Zero's unique skill that allowed him to see them, as spirits don't usually reveal themselves to humans. Zero felt disappointed, thinking he had only gotten close to the little ones because of his skill rather than forming a true friendship with them. Grace disagreed, explaining that one's skills reflect their true self. She pointed out that being able to see spirits and being friends with them were two different things. Zero looked pleased with Grace's explanation. After their dinner, Grace suggested that Zero should hide the fact that he had such a skill. Zero wondered why, since everyone in Grace's world usually had one. Grace reminded him that although anyone in her world could use magic, most people couldn't see spirits, so not many could form a contract with one. If people knew that Zero could see spirits, they might take advantage of him, forcing a spirit to make a contract with them to become stronger. The thought of the little spirits being forced to do something angered Zero. and he swore he would beat anyone who tried it. Grace asked him to calm down since it was only a possibility. She just wanted Zero to understand how important and powerful spirits were. Zero then looked at the cute, round little spirits and asked if they really were spirits. Grace couldn't confirm it since she couldn't see them, but the little ones matched the descriptions. She hadn't expected them to look so cute and sighed, wondering what to do next. There were many spirits around her, but since she couldn't see them, she couldn't form a contract. Zero wondered if he could ask the little ones to become friends with Grace. Grace didn't want that because it would mean relying on Zero's help. She appreciated his help, but she didn't feel right about it since it wasn't her effort, and she didn't want to burden the spirits. Zero realized that Grace was a really kind person. Grace was shocked and said she had thought he saw her as a dumb, selfish girl. Zero admitted that he had, and Grace called him horrible before becoming sad. She decided to rest for the day and try to befriend the spirits in the morning. Zero reminded her that she could ask for help anytime. He was already sure the little spirits liked her since the fire spirits had already started gathering around her. A week had passed, and despite expecting to form a contract with the spirits, Grace still couldn't see them. She felt depressed again and cried out loud. Zero wondered what was wrong since the little ones were gathered around her. He told her to calm down and look at the new spirit that had just arrived. Grace looked hard at the bonfire where a fire spirit was relaxing. However, she still couldn't see it. Zero then picked up the fire spirit and introduced it to Grace, asking if they could become friends since she wasn't a bad person. The spirit agreed and Zero thanked it. The spirit then suggested they perform the proof of friendship gesture. Grace noticed Zero raising his pointer finger and panicked. She tried to call out what Zero was doing, but he explained that it was a gesture of friendship he did with the little ones. Grace cried out loud, exclaiming that she had figured out why she couldn't form a contract. She explained that the gesture Zero was about to do with the spirit was how one formed a contract. She realized that the reason no one was making a contract with her was because the spirits had already formed contracts with Zero, so they couldn't make one with her anymore. Zero also realized this after hearing Grace's explanation. He casually apologized, admitting that he knew nothing about it. Grace celebrated, realizing she wasn't useless after all, and that everything was Zero's fault. Just then, the new fire spirit waddled over to Grace and touched her pinky finger. Grace felt something touch her and was finally able to see the spirit. She asked if it was willing to form a contract with her, and the spirit gave a gesture of approval. Grace felt happy and thanked the adorable fire spirit. Zero also felt glad for Grace. Grace soon went to sleep with her fire spirit, and Zero took a look at her happy sleeping face. He began wondering again what he should do in this world. Deciding not to overthink, he hoped for another day. Surprisingly, Grace still blamed Zero for everything in her dream and sleep. A few days later, Zero and Grace rode in a carriage heading toward the capital. However, Grace got severe motion sickness, and they had to get off the carriage because she needed to vomit. Zero complained that Grace hadn't told him about her condition. Grace apologized, explaining that she didn't want to cause any trouble. Zero blamed her cloak for covering her breath and asked why she always wore it. Grace couldn't answer and continued vomiting. As Zero suggested they rest for a while, he noticed something and quickly pulled Grace into a bush. Grace thought Zero was turning into a beast, but she misunderstood. Zero told her to stay down and look in a specific direction. Grace saw goblins nearby. Zero realized they would be discovered soon. Despite feeling dizzy, Grace wanted to fight the goblins to show off her new power after making a contract with a spirit. However, Zero jumped out of the bush and charged at the goblins, needing to strike first. The goblins noticed him, and one archer aimed its bow and arrow at him. Zero, alert, threw his mithril pipe at the goblin archer. The pipe hit the goblin's face, distracting the others. Zero used this opportunity to kick the goblins. With a menacing expression like a demon lord, he took down the goblins on his own, and Grace was too late to join the fight. Zero felt refreshed after the battle. He then noticed the goblins disappearing as if they were snapped away, leaving pieces of jewelry behind. When he asked Grace about them, he found her unconscious again and decided to camp for the night. That night, Grace apologized. Zero told her not to worry too much and gave her some medicine made by the spirits. He asked her to stay put while he and the children went to find more firewood. Grace offered to help, but Zero said it would be troublesome if she fainted again. Realizing he had made a mistake, Zero saw that Grace was getting more depressed and understood that the mood was getting worse. He thought about asking her something and listening to her, but he didn't know what to do next and felt frustrated. Grace, knowing she often caused trouble, felt useless. Zero, feeling guilty, remembered how he had been given a second chance in life. He reminded himself that he wanted to become a better person. Despite his desire to change, he felt pathetic. Overcome with frustration, he yelled loudly and then sat down in front of Grace, who was flustered and scared. He admitted he didn't know what to do in situations like this, offered to listen since he couldn't say anything helpful, and asked her not to hold back. Grace was surprised but then smiled. Zero apologized for being a bad guy, and Grace thanked him and asked him to listen to her story. Grace shared that she had an older sister who was much more talented than she was. She had always been compared to her sister and people often talked behind her back. Zero said those people were terrible. Grace somewhat agreed and admitted she had blamed herself. This was why she had decided to go on a trip to make a pact with a spirit to become a full-fledged mage. She hoped that even with just a little recognition, she would be accepted. Zero then realized that Grace was like he used to be. People had been afraid of him and had not tried to understand him. He had felt like he didn't belong anywhere, which is why he had wanted a place where he could be accepted. However, he had only imagined this need until he saw how much he was loved at his own funeral. Zero told Grace that there was no guaranteed way she would be accepted by others. He asked why she needed their approval. He reminded her that she had chosen to join him on a journey to find the little ones, and that was already a great achievement. He promised that if anyone did not acknowledge Grace, he would deal with them. He told her to stop crying and turned away. Grace noticed Zero blushing and giggled before thanking him. A few minutes later, Zero wondered if Grace had finally calmed down and gone to sleep. He then asked the little ones to help him become Grace's support. They all agreed, and Zero was pleased. He saw that Grace was trying hard and decided to reward her later. The next morning, Zero was greeted with a burnt breakfast, which Grace had proudly made. Even the spirits were cautious about the food like it was something radioactive, but Zero still took a bite. Unfortunately, it was inedible, and Zero complained that the food seemed to have killing intent. Seeing that Grace couldn't cook, Zero thought she might have been a sheltered princess or something. Grace flinched and blushed, denying Zero's guess. Zero wondered how Grace had managed without cooking skills. Grace couldn't believe Zero was laughing at her. Zero then advised her to take things at her own pace. Grace assured him not to worry as they were getting closer to the capital. Soon after, Zero found himself standing in front of a huge gate and wall. Grace asked if he was feeling scared. Zero said no and then wondered why there were so many people waiting in front of the gate. He realized it was an inspection area. Grace told him not to worry and instructed him to follow her. Zero was confused because they were supposed to wait in line. Grace asked him to keep his hood on since they would quickly pass through the gate. Zero tried to stop her, thinking they needed to wait properly. At that moment, Zero pulled back Grace's hood while trying to stop her. The guards were shocked, and Zero thought things would go badly since they were skipping the line. To his surprise, the guards were delighted to see Grace and welcomed her back with respect, even kneeling. Grace just smiled. Zero was confused by the guards' respect for Grace, and even the spirits seemed unsure. Feeling flustered, Grace suggested they move on and apologized to Zero for not informing him earlier. Zero, confused by what Grace was saying, realized something about her identity. He assumed she might be the daughter of a corrupt merchant. Then, Grace asked him to take his own life. Zero, still confused, asked Grace why they were walking inside the castle. At that moment, a girl called out to Grace, revealing herself to be Grace's older sister, whom she had mentioned before. The sister couldn't believe Grace was heading straight to her room without greeting their father. She questioned Grace's judgment for bringing home a man who looked disreputable and ordered a guard to drag Zero away. Naturally, Zero's patience wore thin and he confronted Grace's sister. He asked if he was the disreputable man she was referring to, and she confirmed it. Grace grew anxious about the confrontation between the two. Zero then declared that he was ready to fight if that's what she wanted. Grace's sister called his words vulgar, further proving her point. Grace asked her sister to stop being mean to her guest and friend. She then asked Zero to follow her as she prepared to greet her father. Her sister tried to stop her, but Grace ignored her. Zero praised Grace's attitude and smirked. He noticed Grace's sister glaring at him and she said it wasn't over between them yet. Zero didn't respond and Grace called out to him. Soon Zero found himself in a sparkly guest room. Knowing that Zero didn't understand what was going on, Grace revealed that she was Grace Orphan, the second princess of the Orphan Kingdom. She apologized for hiding this from him. She had planned to tell Zero earlier but was afraid he would treat her differently. She wondered if Zero was mad, but he didn't care at all. Grace was surprised that Zero remained calm and didn't feel sorry for treating royalty rudely. Zero got annoyed and flicked Grace on the forehead. He thanked her for staying true to herself, the Grace he knew, and not acting like a princess. He joked about kneeling before her, calling it a dumb idea. He didn't care who Grace was because she was still the same person he had met from the start. Grace seemed happy that Zero still talked to her in a casual way. Zero reminded her that she was an idiot, called her that again, and told her not to worry too much. Suddenly, a young maid appeared to serve some tea. Grace introduced the girl as her personal maid named Lily. Lily greeted Zero briefly and then informed Grace that the king wanted to see both of them. Grace got up to make some preparations and asked Lily to look after Zero in the meantime. After Grace left, Zero had a strange feeling since he couldn't start a conversation with Lily, and the little ones were playing on their own. Then he heard Lily click her tongue, which shocked him. He wondered if he had imagined it, but he hadn't. Lily gave him a degrading look and told him to stop staring at her with eyes that could scare off monsters. He realized that Lily was two-faced after hearing her harsh words. She then bluntly said she wouldn't pretend to be nice since Grace wasn't there and told Zero to unalive. Zero was shocked because Lily was nothing like the gentle maids he had imagined. All he saw in front of him was a bratty maid, and he decided to confront her. At that moment, Grace came back wearing a new outfit. She asked if Lily had done something wrong. Zero said there wasn't anything wrong. Lily then apologized for her mistakes, saying they made Zero angry. Grace disagreed and said Lily had always done her job well. She asked Zero to forgive Lily. Zero agreed quickly, but Lily's face still made him upset. He lost his temper and called Lily a brat. Grace tried to calm him down while Lily walked away. Soon after, Zero and Lily arrived at the door of the throne room. Grace said she would do the usual talking and told Zero to behave. Zero agreed because he didn't want to cause trouble for Grace. With that, the two of them entered the throne room. Grace greeted her father, who was sitting on the throne. Zero finally met the father Grace had been talking about. Her annoying older sister was also there and started ordering Zero to kneel. Zero began to feel irritated, but the younger ones tried to calm him down, and one of them tried to say something to him. Zero then noticed Grace trembling while kneeling, so he silently knelt down too, which surprised her. The older sister remarked that Zero should have done that from the start since he was just a commoner. Zero tried to stay patient for Grace's sake. The king then told his eldest daughter, Amaris, to stop because Zero was a guest. Zero found it funny since Amaris's name matched perfectly with the word bitch in Japanese. The king then told Grace that her actions had troubled many people. Grace apologized, but the king sighed and said he didn't need her apology. However, he asked if she had gained anything from her selfish actions. Grace proudly announced that she had formed a contract with a spirit and was now one step closer to adulthood. Amaris got excited and asked their father to congratulate Grace. Zero now expected that Grace would be accepted by her father. Unfortunately, it wasn't a happily ever after story. The king called his own daughter a fool, and despite Grace's effort and success, he kept insisting that she was a burden to everyone because of her selfish actions. He said she wouldn't grow up with that behavior and could only be treated as half a person. Zero was shocked, and Amaris started to sweat nervously. The king blamed Grace's immaturity as the reason she hadn't been able to form a contract until now. He told them to leave the throne room. Amaris tried to reason with the king, but he wouldn't listen to his talented daughter either. Grace apologized and promised to reflect on her actions. She also apologized to Zero for the trouble and said she would arrange a guest room for him. Suddenly, Zero patted Grace's head and apologized. He couldn't hold it in anymore. When Amaris asked what he was doing, Zero told her to be quiet. He said he had been patient and silent, but now he didn't care if Grace's father was a king. He was angry. He pointed out that Grace had just returned safely from a dangerous journey to form a contract with a spirit and deserved some praise for her efforts. He asked the king if he even knew the real reason behind Grace's actions. The king claimed she was just rushing for success. Zero then called the king stupid, which worried Grace. He exclaimed that Grace was being treated poorly and mocked behind her back. The real reason Grace was driven to a breaking point was because of her own father, the king. Zero finished his outburst. Amaris ordered the knights to capture and execute Zero immediately. Zero pulled out his mithril pipe ready to fight. Grace grew concerned. Zero urged her to speak up. He reminded her of how she once hated herself, went alone to contract a spirit so others would see her differently, and told her this was her only chance to say what she really wanted to say. Grace seemed conflicted. Amaris commanded the knights not to show Zero any mercy. Grace suddenly shouted, her voice echoing in the throne room, telling everyone to stop. She then glared at her father, apologized, and admitted everything was her fault, asking him not to punish Zero. Amaris told her not to cover for Zero, but Grace insisted she would accept any punishment. She admitted that Zero's words were actually her own. Even though it was harsh to express her feelings through Zero's mouth, Grace felt oddly refreshed. Amaris was surprised by Grace's words and expression. Grace asked Zero to let her handle the situation, but he wanted to take responsibility for his outburst. The two bantered until the king interrupted them, instructing Grace to take Zero to his guest room. Soon after, Zero saw the little ones brainstorming about what might happen to them. In a quick flashback, the king himself had suggested that he should review the incident so he could overlook their recent actions. Zero still couldn't understand the king's words. Lily hoped Zero would be executed right there. Zero was surprised when the small maid suddenly appeared out of nowhere. Lily then claimed that Grace was now in a bad spot because of Zero's actions. She pointed out that Grace's built-up efforts were wasted, and it was all because of Zero. Zero could lose his head, and Grace could lose her chance to succeed to the throne. Rumors would spread that bringing someone who could cause a riot inside the castle was a thoughtless act for royalty. People would now say that Grace had fallen low. Zero then agreed that the way he spoke was trashy. Lily was glad that Zero had some self-awareness. However, he felt bad after seeing Grace doing her best. He couldn't accept the fact that Grace couldn't even receive a simple praise from her family. Knowing that Zero was rowdy with everyone, Lily called him a simple idiot. Zero asked if Lily was trying to pick a fight. Lily then thanked Zero out of nowhere, which made him blush since it was so unexpected. Zero didn't want to think further about what had just happened, and he looked forward to what Grace would do next. Zero left his room but got lost. Somehow, he ended up in front of Amaris's room and overheard her speaking badly about him. As he tried to walk away, he heard Amaris mention how scared she was of his eyes to the point that she almost cried. Curious, Zero peeked inside and realized that Amaris was actually frightened of him. Then Zero noticed Amaris holding a doll and calling it Grace. She began speaking sweetly to it, showing the Grace doll sisterly affection. Zero and the spirits felt like they were in a bad situation, having witnessed something they shouldn't have, something forbidden. They collectively promised to forget what they had seen and heard. Just as they were planning to erase their memories, Grace appeared. She asked why Zero was standing in front of her sister's room and wondered if they were going to talk. Zero claimed he was just returning to his room. Amaris then creepily peeked through the door and asked why they were standing there. Grace apologized for disturbing her and said she would go back to her room. Zero knew he had messed up. If he turned his back now, a Siscon monster would definitely kill him. Amaris asked what Zero was doing outside her room. Zero, looking for a way to escape, claimed he was on his way to Grace's room to meet her. However, Grace mentioned that she had seen Zero standing in front of the door for a while. Zero insisted that he was just on his way to see her and happened to run into her. Amaris then told Grace to go back to her room because she needed to talk to Zero. Grace realized what was happening and assumed that Zero had come to Amaris to befriend her. Zero was now in serious trouble. Zero tried to stop Grace from leaving but failed. He attempted to walk away, but Amaris quickly grabbed his hair and ordered him to get inside. Tea was served, but Zero and the younger ones felt anxious. Amaris told him to drink the tea because it had poison in it. Without hesitation, she asked if Zero had seen everything. Zero couldn't say anything, and then a knife flew past him. Amaris was disappointed that she missed her shot. Zero quickly hid behind the couch and asked her to calm down. He promised not to tell anyone about what he had seen. Amaris didn't trust Zero at all and believed he would blackmail her. Zero exclaimed that he wouldn't do something so cowardly and in the first place hated Amaris so much that he didn't want anything to do with her and never wanted to see her again. Amaris then asked if Zero also didn't want to have anything to do with Grace. She claimed her sister had changed because of Zero, and as the older sister, Amaris had the duty to show her the right path to take, and Zero was an obstacle to that. Zero concluded that Amaris was just a Siscon who couldn't be honest with herself and would throw meaningless tantrums. Amaris got pissed off and planned to kill Zero. Zero shared how he had done the same thing to his little sister and got hated for it. He assumed Amaris really liked her sister, but instead of getting close, their distance kept increasing. Zero confessed that he had also experienced the same and advised Amaris to keep her feelings under control. Or one day, Grace wouldn't talk to her anymore. Amaris was shocked since she had done a lot for Grace. Zero then shared how Grace felt that Amaris was hating her. Amaris was doubtful, but she could really feel Grace acting distant. Zero advised her to think about what Grace really wanted and not to force her expectations on her. He claimed he had read it in a book, and the gullible Amaris believed him. Zero continued pushing and advised Amaris to be more honest. However, he knew Amaris would nag Grace again if they were left alone, so he suggested joining in to help the two sisters get closer together like best friends. Amaris agreed that his idea might work. Since things were now okay, Zero tried to excuse himself out of the room. However, Amaris grabbed his hair again and recalled that Zero had seen her acting silly minutes ago. As thanks for Zero's advice, Amaris promised to offer flowers by his gravestone. Zero exclaimed that he wouldn't say anything to Grace since he didn't have the intention in the first place. He told Amaris how Grace had helped him a lot, and he wanted to pay that back by making the sisters get closer than before. He claimed he would also offer a hand to Amaris anytime she needed. He then excused himself out and confessed that he liked Amaris's side of trying to get closer to Grace, since he himself had already given up on her little sister. Amaris was left blushing and flustered, and Zero finally managed to escape his deathbed. He realized Amaris was not a bad person at all, but she still pissed him off. As he made his way to his room, he noticed a familiar fire spirit. Zero then spotted Grace on the nearby balcony. He surprised her, and Grace asked him not to do it again. He inquired about what she was doing, and Grace shared that she wanted to feel the evening wind and watch the stars. She confessed that she now felt refreshed, thanks to Zero. Zero claimed that he had only lost his temper and said bad things. However, Grace disagreed and swore to try harder. Despite knowing it was impossible at the moment, she wanted to gain her father's acknowledgement no matter what and when. Her goal was to become a person whom people could trust. Nevertheless, in her current situation, she could be rejected by everyone and be exiled. Zero apologized, believing it was his fault. Grace laughed it off and claimed she didn't mind at all. Zero insisted that it was entirely his fault. Grace then asked if Zero would take responsibility if she got exiled. She had intended it as a joke, but Zero instantly agreed. Grace screamed as she blushed. Zero assured her that he could help her find a job and a place to live on her own if that were the case. However, Grace looked disappointed, which dampened Zero's spirits. Grace then agreed that she could manage on her own if she got exiled and wondered what would happen to Zero. Zero gripped his fist, and Grace apologized for asking something weird. Zero had never thought about that before, as people usually avoided him. He was always alone and had been happy when Grace told him that she wanted to stay with him. Zero confessed that he hadn't thought much about his future, as he had only come to the castle to help Grace and didn't have a plan for what to do after that. Grace could see how conflicted Zero was and gave him a reassuring slap on the back. She then suggested going on a journey with her, as she might find something along the way. She claimed that Zero would also find something for himself. She proposed making it Zero's journey's purpose to meet and befriend people. Zero was surprised and smiled, finding Grace's suggestion interesting. That was something he had wanted to do in his previous life but had given up on. He thanked Grace for the suggestion. After meeting the little ones, Grace and Iruji, Zero realized that it wasn't bad to be friends with many more people in this world. However, solving Grace's problem came first. The two soon met with the king, who decided to overlook the riot that Zero and Grace had caused. Despite this, the two looked worried for some reason. The king then shared that he and the ministers needed to confirm if Grace had really contracted with a spirit. They decided to give Grace a quest. Zero and the spirits were confused by this decision. 2 months had passed since Zero's reincarnation and his encounter with the little ones. He was initially fine with helping Grace on her quest, and Amorous joining their party didn't faze him either. However, he voiced his concerns about their flashy carriage, which he believed would attract unwanted attention from enemies. Amorous retorted, calling him an idiot, and reminded him that as royalty they were traveling for the sake of the people, and therefore wouldn't be attacked. Grace concurred, citing their respected royal family and the lack of rebels in the kingdom. Zero turned to Lily, asking if she had ever escorted a mission like this before, but the petite maid gave him the cold shoulder. Zero's worries about potential attackers spotting their ostentatious carriage only grew, but the siblings dismissed his concerns, claiming that no one would dare challenge them. In a brief flashback, the minister explained the details of Grace's quest to test her abilities, based on her progress and results. Her mission was to investigate and subjugate the nest of lizardmen in the village located east of the kingdom. When Grace inquired about the number of monsters and the time limit for her quest, the minister curtly told her to read the document. The journey began without a hitch, but Amaris soon ruined the atmosphere by behaving like a spoiled royalty in the wilderness. Zero was taken aback by her presence and couldn't help but view her as useless. To make matters worse, Lily was also giving him a hard time, seemingly hoping he would get himself killed. When Lily told him to follow her, Zero was skeptical, but she revealed that she had something important to discuss. She chastised him for not understanding that she wouldn't behave poorly in front of those she served, the royal sisters. Lily then shared a crucial piece of information, that there were people opposed to the royal family, just as Zero had suspected. He asked if there were enemy countries involved, but Lily warned him that there were also enemies within their own ranks. Zero's initial concerns about the carriage were proven correct, and he couldn't believe Lily hadn't done anything to address the issue. Lily claimed that she couldn't go against those she served, leaving Zero frustrated and worried about their situation. However, it would have been bad if they had continued to travel to the next village without a solid plan, and Zero had suggested a camouflage. Zero had noticed some of the little spirits suggesting something and had decided to leave things to them. He asked Lily to leave the carriage to him since he had some powerful allies to help. Despite feeling doubtful, Lily had left the task to Zero. Zero had then asked the little spirits to do their thing. The next morning, their journey continued, and Lily couldn't believe what she was seeing. Zero looked worried, despite the spirits looking proud. Lily exclaimed that changing the appearance of the carriage overnight was impossible. Zero had agreed that it was physically impossible. He was already glad that the blockhead princesses didn't really mind the carriage's new look. The group had soon reached the village, but after talking to the village chief, they hadn't been able to gain any new information. They only knew that there was a cave 1 hour away from the village that was reported to be the nest of the lizardmen. Zero had suggested scouting the area first. Suddenly, Amorous had told him to wait, insisting she was the leader since she was the most experienced among them. Zero couldn't believe Amorous was fussing over being the leader. Lily had then reminded Amorous that the quest was given to Grace, and Grace would be considered the leader of the group. The gullible Siskin had quickly agreed. Grace had then heeded Zero's advice, and the group had headed straight to the mountains. They soon discovered the cave and a bonfire in front of it. However, that wasn't enough information to determine the number of monsters. The 3 girls had quickly come out of the bushes ready to charge forward. Zero had asked them to wait, and Amorous had wondered if Zero was getting scared. Zero had felt frustrated because of these 2 blockheaded sisters. Grace had reminded him how Zero had claimed that in a fight one should strike first. Zero had run out of patience and scolded them, asking them to use their heads a little. He had reminded them that they didn't know how many enemies there were. Assuming there were only 10 or so, Amorous had confidently divided the lizardmen to be subjugated among them and called it a perfect plan. Zero and the spirits couldn't believe what they were hearing. Zero had called them a lost cause, not considering the real number of monsters to confront, and had talked to the spirits for consolation. Amorous had wondered why Zero was talking to himself. Amorous's dumbness had made Zero forget that the girls couldn't see the little spirits. At that moment, Zero had realized something and the girls were left confused. For the time being, he had suggested going back to the village to form a plan. The leader, Grace, had agreed despite looking confused. Lily had followed what Grace said, but Amorous had asked why she should listen to someone like Zero. Zero had then given the girls his usual scary glare, and they had fallen silent. He had asked them one more time to return to the village, and the girls hadn't hesitated to agree. As they returned to the village, Zero inquired about the others' capabilities. Grace proudly confirmed that she wielded a staff as her weapon, could cast fire-based spells, and had formed a contract with one spirit. Lily claimed she could control ice and had one contracted spirit. Zero asked her to demonstrate her ice magic, and she quickly obliged, firing a blast of ice towards him, intentionally missing the shot. She apologized, feigning a slipped hand. Zero, however, could clearly see that Lily was out to eliminate him. Next, Zero asked Amorous about her abilities. The Princess Knight boasted that she could harness lightning magic, and wielded a sword forged from pure mithril. She also showcased her mithril armor, claiming it was reserved for the chosen ones. Zero played along, marveling at her impressive gear. Amorous wondered if Zero coveted something made of mithril, assuming he was envious of her equipment. Zero casually revealed that his pipe was also crafted from mithril and proudly displayed it. Amorous was skeptical, taking the pipe and striking it with her mithril sword. Seeing that it remained undamaged, Amorous was stunned. The pipe's quality surpassed her own mithril gear. Both Amorous and Lily suspected that Zero had stolen it from somewhere. Zero explained that an old man he had saved had crafted it, and asked them to trust him a little. Amorous sought confirmation from Grace, who vouched for Zero's story, and finally Amorous believed him. Just then, the little ones burst through the window, reporting their findings to Zero. He devised a plan to send the spirits on a reconnaissance mission, exploiting the opponent's weakness since only he could see them. The girls watched as Zero seemingly conversed with himself again, but Grace had an inkling about his behavior. Zero shared the intel he had gathered about their enemies. He informed the girls that there was only one path in the cave and that 15 lizardmen were lounging inside. Lily questioned the credibility of Zero's information, worried that such baseless claims could jeopardize Grace's crucial quest. Zero fabricated a story claiming he had spoken to some of the villagers. Amorous and Lily were doubtful, knowing that no one would willingly converse with Zero with his scary face. Grace exclaimed that Zero's skill was a divine gift, capable of gathering information and having saved them numerous times before. Zero played along, and Amorous asked again if it was true. Grace confirmed it, and Amorous eventually believed her. Zero was relieved that Amorous was gullible, but Lily still looked at him with skepticism. With a stutter, Zero spoke about how he wasn't trustworthy, but his only concern was everyone's safety. He claimed he was worried about Amorous and Lily, and his words made Lily's face flush with embarrassment. Amorous, on the other hand, looked surprised. Grace asked about her own safety, but Zero ignored her. Amorous, being an airhead, took Zero's words as a friendly gesture, while Lily thought otherwise. Grace, still protesting being left out, fell silent as Zero patted her head. He thanked her for backing him up, and his close, sweaty face and nickname made Grace blush. She exclaimed that she didn't like her nickname, and Amorous pointed out hers too. Zero told the sisters to shut up and asked them to continue planning. The group soon returned to the cave entrance. Upon seeing the lizardmen for the first time, Zero recalled playing Pokemon. Lily wondered if Zero had never seen a lizardman before. Zero couldn't answer that question and instead pointed out that the lizardmen were about to sleep since their bonfire had just died down. He then told the sisters it was time to move, but discovered them sleeping instead. He smacked the two girls to wake them up, and they called him cruel. Zero scolded them for sleeping when they were preparing to assault the lizardmen. Two spirits then approached and reported that the lizardmen had already fallen asleep. The first part of their plan was to create a massive puddle using Lily's ice magic, which would be melted by Grace's fire to lure out the monsters. The second part involved using Amorous's lightning magic to electrocute the lizardmen as soon as they stepped on the puddle. Zero warned the girls not to step on the puddle by mistake. The third part of the plan would involve Zero and Amorous with instructions for Grace and Lily to shoot the lizardmen with magic when they came close to the puddle. Amorous then suggested creating an ice wall using Lily's magic to group the lizardmen together, allowing Amorous and Zero to focus on the melee fight while the other two remained at a safe distance. Zero was speechless, not expecting Amorous to come up with a decent plan. With Lily's final touch, the Lizardmen's subjugation quest had begun. Seeing everyone in position made Zero glad. He announced that it was time to start. Zero created loud noises using a frying pan and an earth spirit's head. Amorous asked where the pan had even come from. Zero told them to focus and look as the Lizardmen were emerging, enraged. Grace was taken aback and started firing fireballs towards the monsters. Zero couldn't believe Grace had no self-control. A fireball then flew towards Zero and he deftly deflected it with his mithril pipe as if playing baseball. The fireball then homered towards the Lizardmen, and Zero felt proud. Amorous called it reckless, but it was impressive that Zero could deflect magic like that. Zero told her to shut up and instructed her that it was her turn. Amorous then pulled out her sword and stabbed it into the ground. Electricity crawled across the area. Zero told her to control herself. However, Amorous went overboard and everyone was left stunned as the whole place flashed a bright light in the middle of the night. A minute later, the aftermath revealed a dried-up puddle and a serving of dozens of fried lizardmen cooked to perfection. Zero complained about Amorous' actions, but the princess pointed out that the monsters had been annihilated in the end. Zero then counted the dead lizardmen and only came up with 10 of them. Grace then told Zero to watch out as a huge fireball was flying toward him. Grace then pushed Zero to the side and received a frontal attack. Recalling Grace's smile, Zero grabbed his mithril pipe and ran towards the cave. Amorous told him to stop since Grace was fine, but Zero didn't listen. Amorous then left Grace to Lily's care and chased after Zero. Zero couldn't help but curse at Grace's actions, thinking she should still receive the praise she wanted from her father. He felt stupid and started cursing himself, then the lizardmen in front of him. A huge lizardman tried to chop him down and Zero barely dodged it. He claimed he didn't feel any pain and fought back. However, the lizardman still stood tall. Zero got pissed off and kicked it down, looking down on the lizardman like a thug. Just then, Amorous told him to move aside and activated her lightning magic, her face filled with anger. Zero tried to warn her about using such magic inside the cave, but Amorous didn't listen for the second time and unleashed her magic attack. Zero couldn't do anything about it. Lily heard the explosion that happened inside the cave. Inside, Amorous looked proud, but Zero was totally pissed off by her recklessness. He explained that using such an attack would make the cave collapse. Of course, Amorous didn't know that. Zero then started panicking as the cave began to crumble. However, he was distracted by the dead lizard man turning into an egg. He picked it up and wondered what it was. Amorous asked what he was doing and told Zero to run. Fortunately, the two were able to escape the cave. Amorous claimed it hadn't collapsed at all and Zero was only overthinking. Right after she said that, the cave broke down and sealed the entrance. Worried for Grace, Zero then checked if she was fine. He discovered Grace, who was trembling and looking shocked. She stuttered her words as she asked why the two of them were holding hands. The two didn't even know they were holding each other's hands. The legal wife asked what was happening between the two. Amorous spoke up and explained what had happened to Grace. Zero and the spirits wondered why Grace was acting like that. Grace found it unfair that her sister held hands with someone when she hadn't yet. Zero didn't understand why the two were bickering, but he was glad that all was well. However, for some reason, the spirits looked worried about something. Recalling how Grace had gotten hit by a big fireball, he asked if she was okay. Grace was fine, except for some small burns. But she was more concerned about Zero's wound on his face. Zero claimed it was only a scratch, and wanted to know how Grace had still managed to escape unscathed. Grace explained that a fire magic user had high resistance against fire. She wondered if Zero was mad at her. Zero was not, but he asked her to tell him next time if she was planning to do something reckless. He then casually patted her head and genuinely thanked her. Amorous and Lily looked worried by this scene. Just then, Zero recalled picking up something near the lizard man's corpse and asked what it was. Amorous told him to stop holding it and slapped Zero's arm. Zero asked what her problem was. Amorous then asked if Zero was not feeling well or something. Zero was fine though, which made Amorous confused. Grace asked what the stone was and Amorous asked her not to touch it. Angered and doubtful, Amorous asked why Zero had the stone with him and if he was related to the Spirit Liberation Troop. Zero looked confused, hearing the word liberation when the little ones were freely living on their own. However, the spirits gave him concerned looks. Realizing that there was something wrong with the stone, Amorous demanded answers as she drew her sword. Grace asked her to calm down, but Amorous was on high alert since, in the first place, they didn't know anything about Zero before meeting him. Zero could agree to that. He then claimed he was not their enemy, and he was not a part of any liberation troop or something. Amorous still doubted him since he was trying to give her the stone. Zero didn't care if she didn't believe him, but as he said, he had found the stone near the dead lizard man. And if his purpose was to give it to Grace, then he should have done it a long time ago. He didn't even know the Liberation Troop since it hadn't been long since he arrived. Grace tried to stop him from talking further. Zero felt bad for Grace since he wanted to hide his background. Just when he tried to say something, Zero started sweating and feeling nervous. He then noticed Grace's worried face and Amarys's hateful look. He realized that he didn't want to be hated. He was planning to tell Amarys and Lily about his background so he could close the distance between them. He laughed, recalling how in his past life he was always putting up a tough front. Amarys asked why he was laughing. Zero then concluded that it would be dangerous to touch the stone. However, he confessed that he really didn't know what it was, and it was only a short time since he had met Grace and learned about the world. Amarys asked what he was talking about. Zero then confessed that he was from another world. Grace looked concerned about this revelation. However, Amarys did not buy his reason and punched Zero's lights out. She had trusted him for a while, but she couldn't believe Zero would come up with such an excuse. Zero then pulled out his mithril pipe to fight back, but Grace stopped them from going further. The two instructed her to move aside. Grace stuttered her words but threatened them that she would hate them both if they fought. Zero couldn't believe Grace was saying such things, but Amarys immediately backed off. Grace claimed that Zero was telling the truth. Amarys claimed she trusted Grace, but there was no reason to believe Zero in the first place. Grace then shared how Zero didn't know about magic and spirits in the beginning. Despite saving a royalty, Zero hadn't asked for anything as a reward, and he had even joined a quest that was totally unrelated to him. She claimed that Zero would have done something to her already if he had plans to trick her. Zero claimed one more time that he didn't have such thoughts. Moreover, Grace pointed out how unskillful Zero was. Zero got pissed off by her words. On top of that, Lily and Amarys gave him a teasing look. What made it worse were the spirits' agreement. Since Grace had already said a lot of words, Amarys decided to trust Zero in the meantime. Everyone calmed down and Zero asked what the stone was. Amarys confessed that she also didn't know much. She had heard that there were people claiming that spirits were higher life forms of their world and didn't exist to be controlled by humans, hence be liberated. They believed that the use of spirits would bring chaos to the world. The spirits looked proud for some reason. Zero asked what the black stone was, and Amarys exclaimed that it had some sort of connection to the Liberation Troop and was a dangerous object that could suck up its holder's magical power. Looking worried, Grace asked what happened to a person after their magical power got all sucked up. Amarys claimed they could be stuck in a coma and never wake up. Lily then wondered why Zero was still fine despite holding the stone. Amarys also didn't know, which was why she doubted him. She then asked Lily and Grace to lightly touch the stone with their fingertips. The two touched the stone and quickly felt how their magical power got taken away. Zero then casually picked it up. He claimed it felt weird, but nothing was happening to him. Lily wondered if it only affected the residents of their world. Grace then realized something and Amarys asked what it was. Grace was just assuming, but she felt awkward to say it. Zero claimed it was fine to say anything since he had already confessed that he was an otherworlder. Grace recalled that Zero couldn't use magic at all. Lily and Amarys were shocked, since using magic was a common sense for them. Amarys found it totally impossible. Zero reminded her that seeing someone from another world was already unbelievable. Grace didn't really have any proof, but it was the only reason she could think of. Zero asked her to be blunt. She claimed it was not that Zero couldn't use magic, but didn't have magical power in the first place. Both Zero and Amarys were shocked, and their screams resounded in the dark forest. Amarys asked how that could be possible. Zero then shared how his world didn't have magic users anyway and wondered if that was the case. Knowing that a magicless world existed, Lily couldn't help but agree with Grace's guess. Zero didn't really care about not using magic since he didn't use it in the first place. Amarys then asked how Zero could go on with his daily life, like starting a fire and drinking water. But Zero had the most casual and magicless solutions. He told her to shut up already and pinched her cheeks. Seeing the two close made Grace worry about her position. Zero agreed that being unable to use magic was inconvenient, but he didn't care since even the spirits couldn't use magic. Amarys smacked his head and reminded him that he was not a spirit. Zero felt that Amarys didn't hold back her strength. He then recalled Amarys claiming there was no one opposing the royal family. The three girls flinched, and Amarys sighed since there was no point in keeping it a secret. She confirmed that there were organizations opposing the royal family and claimed it was confidential information that someone like her, the vice captain of the Royal Knights, would know. Zero was surprised that Amarys was not the simple idiot he thought he knew. Lily then recalled the opposing force inside the kingdom and asked Amarys about the situation. Amarys shared that aside from the Spirit Liberation Troop, there were more forces that didn't like the royal family. Aside from that, monsters started becoming more active within the kingdom's vicinity. There was nothing to worry about, but Amarys wanted to say something more. Zero then assumed that the monsters used not to attack humans before. Amarys then realized Zero was from another world after all. Amarys gave up doubting him and continued explaining. Humans and monsters had always been on bad terms, but monsters would only attack when humans entered their territory and didn't usually come to attack since they had at least the sense to avoid danger. However, they had been seen around human villages lately, and there were reports of people getting attacked. Zero recalled how Grace was chased by goblins earlier. Zero then wondered if the black rock had something to do with it. Amorous didn't know since there were no reports of monsters carrying the rock around. If they were carrying it around in the first place, Amorous wondered why the monsters were still fine and their magical powers were not sucked out. Grace agreed since a mere tap felt like a lot of magical power was sucked away. Everyone fell silent since no one had any idea at all. Zero then asked the spirits if they knew anything. Based on the little one's reactions, Zero realized they knew, but somehow, they looked like they didn't want to talk about it. Zero forgot about it and suggested they return to the village first and get the carriage to head back home. Grace agreed that worrying wouldn't help them at all. The group soon returned to the village and discovered it was noisy despite being early in the morning. Grace assumed that the villagers were celebrating the success of her quest. Amorous told them to hide in the nearby bushes, since she was having a bad feeling. They then sneaked around near the village chief's house and discovered hooded individuals looking for their group. Upon closer inspection, Amorous realized the strange people were from the Spirit Liberation Troop. She assumed she and Grace were their targets and wondered why they knew they were in the village. Zero reminded them how they set off with a flashy-looking carriage. Lily asked what to do, and Amorous decided to annihilate them. Zero angrily asked them to wait. Deja vu? Zero reminded them that they didn't know how many enemies were out there, and Grace's and Lily's magic powers had just been sucked away. He also pointed out that Amorous could cause innocent casualties if she used her magic. He told them to keep out of sight until they reached the carriage. Zero was mad since striking first was his forte, and the girls kept stealing the thunder from him. Zero then asked Lily if they could set out immediately after riding the carriage. Lily claimed the fog would hinder them and asked him to protect the princesses. Zero apologized for making Lily do the work despite being tired. Zero's worrisome words made Lily blush, and she tangibly told him to get on already. Zero then reminded the block-headed sisters to be quiet and not dare to do anything. The sisters were dead scared by his scary face and agreed. The carriage then paused and Zero asked what was wrong. Lily could see some of the enemies guarding the entrance. Zero wondered if they should abandon the carriage and make a run. Lily asked where the princesses were, and Zero assured her that the two were behaving well. Zero told Lily to continue as he had a plan. The enemies then noticed the carriage and told them to stop. The sisters and Zero held their breaths. Lily shared how they were on their way back to the capital. The enemy doubted her words and Lily asked her master what to do. Zero was confused and opened the window showing her master, which turned out to be Zero. Zero then gave them a glare and the enemies freaked out, calling him an ogre. Zero was offended and Lily apologized for the short temper of her master. She shared how they visited the nearby hot springs and were now on their way back to the capital. The enemy doubted there were only two of them. Lily then leaned forward and whispered. She shared how her master couldn't get along with others since he looked like that. The enemy surprisingly agreed. Zero couldn't help but feel pissed off. The enemies agreed to let the worn-out-looking carriage pass by since the one they were supposed to stop was one from the royalty anyway. The group managed to fool the enemies, but Zero was not happy about what just happened. Lily was glad that the plan worked and teasingly asked Zero what was wrong. She sarcastically called him Master again. Grace and Amorous praised both Lily and Zero, but also joined in to tease Zero about his 1-minute-long Master status. Zero exploded and told them to hurry up to the capital already. The girls couldn't help but laugh and continued teasing him. Zero wondered why the Spirit Liberation Troop was looking for the sisters. Amorous could only assume that they were planning to subvert them. That was quite a statement, but Amorous claimed it was only one of the possibilities, since at that time there existed people who could maintain their country without spirits, and those who wanted to liberate the spirits. If they were captured and taken as hostages, the enemies would demand the liberation of spirits in exchange for their lives. Grace suddenly felt unsettled and asked Lily to hurry so they could immediately report to their father. Zero realized how serious their situation was and noticed Grace's worried expression. Zero then assumed something. As soon as they arrived back at the capital, a loud bearded man welcomed them back. Amorous greeted Gomlas, the captain of the Royal Knights. Gomlas was glad to see Grace doing well. He then wondered if the young man with them was the one from the rumors. Amorous introduced Zero to him and claimed they wouldn't be acquaintances for long. Zero agreed with her words since he didn't want to be close to her either. Just when Amorous exploded with anger, Gomlas's loud laughter overpowered her and gave Zero smacks on his back. He confirmed that Zero was definitely the same guy the king had described. Zero got mad and called Gomlas a gorilla. Grace was taken aback by Zero's disrespectful nickname towards the captain of the chivalric order of the country. Gomlas didn't mind at all and called Zero interesting. People usually got scared in front of him, but Zero was different. He then invited Zero to join the chivalric order, but Zero immediately refused. He claimed he didn't want to join such a stiff group. Gamlas just laughed it off and hoped they could meet again soon. He was glad to have met Zero, and Zero felt the same. He hoped Gamlas would keep his distance, but he could sense that he was not a bad person. Amorous then asked Gamlas for a talk, and shared that it would be about the spirit liberation troops they had encountered recently. Gamlas asked what she meant by that. She reported that the spirit liberation troops might have followed them to the eastern village. It was thanks to Lily that they had managed to avoid any problems. Gamlas then assumed that their information had gotten leaked. He then suggested they all meet the king already. In the throne room, the king commended everyone for completing the quest. Everyone except for Zero knelt in respect. Amorous tried to scold him, but the king was totally fine with it. He then asked Grace for her report. Confidently, Grace announced that the quest was completed and the lizardmen had been subjugated successfully. Everyone was impressed, but Grace claimed she had other concerns in mind. The king asked what it was. She claimed it would be better if her sister, the vice captain of the chivalric order, explained things. The king soon learned about the Black Rock and the Spirit Liberation Troop. Amorous claimed there might be a connection between the two. The minister concluded that it was alarming news. The king then ordered Grace to submit a report as soon as possible and asked Amorous to help her. He told them to rest and claimed a room was already prepared for the guests too. Zero gave him a frustrating glare, seeing that the king hadn't said anything fatherly to Grace. He was getting pissed off. Surprisingly, the king then casually called Grace and commended her for doing well for the sake of the people. Grace was taken aback and thanked her father for his words. Zero was glad that even the stiff king could actually act like a father. He and the spirits were glad for Grace. On the way back to their rooms, Zero silently stared at the girls. He realized that the Blockhead sisters were thinking a lot about the future, especially for the sake of their people. He just realized that the two were really royalties. He then froze as he asked himself what to do. He wondered what he should do. Somehow, Lily could feel something off about Zero. He wondered if he should move from one place to another. He recalled Grace wanting to join him, and that didn't sound like a bad idea. However, he couldn't keep being on the move forever. Despite knowing that, Zero kept trying to look away from that. Grace then called out to Zero and asked if he was listening to her. Zero asked what she was talking about. Amorous called him a blockhead for not listening. The two then started arguing. Grace asked them to stop fighting and making scary faces. Zero then asked what it was, and Grace asked what they should do next. She still needed to write a report about the Black Rock and the Spirit Liberation Troop. She claimed she wouldn't be able to leave the castle for a while, and Zero agreed since it was a serious national affair for them. Grace didn't mind the work, but she was worried about her promise with Zero to travel together, since it might get delayed due to her work. Zero smiled. It was just a verbal promise, but Grace was taking it seriously. Zero patted Grace's head and told her not to worry about it. Grace exclaimed that she should. She felt bad that Zero would be locked inside the castle because of her. This was news to Zero. Zero asked what she was talking about. Grace reminded him that he should help her with the related affairs. He imagined being a scholar inside the castle, and Grace asked what the confused face he was showing was about. She asked if Zero was planning to leave her and travel alone on his own. Zero claimed he hadn't thought that far yet and pointed out that it would be weird for him to work in the castle. Grace exclaimed that it was not weird at all. Zero claimed he couldn't take advantage of her hospitality, but Grace didn't mind at all. Zero claimed he would just hinder her, but Grace angrily told him that it was fine since they made a promise together. Zero tried to ask Amorous for help, but the sister pointed out that Zero was someone mysterious and dangerous to let him run loose. She claimed they didn't have a choice. Zero was surprised that Amorous was not chasing him out like before. Amorous then suggested she supervise Zero while he was in the castle. Grace flinched. With a scary tone, she told Amorous that Zero was hers, and it was obvious that she would be the one to look after him. Amorous quickly gave up but refused to let the two travel together afterward. Grace claimed she was not asking for her sister's approval. This side of Grace was totally scaring off Amorous and the spirits. Grace then whispered in Amorous' ear, telling her that Zero was the type of person they needed to keep a tight hold on, or else he would misunderstand and go somewhere else by himself. She claimed there was no way for her to let Zero run away and claimed she would not lose to Amorous. She also asked if Lily was fine with it. Lily didn't even dare to disagree. Zero, who didn't have any idea about the girls' silent battle, suddenly felt cold. Grace then told Zero to take his time to rest. Zero wondered if he could. Zero then got into his room, and while the spirits were playing around, he shared his thoughts with the little ones. Despite Grace's words, Zero didn't feel like he deserved to stay in the castle any longer, since it was currently an important period of time for her to get recognized. He asked what the spirits were thinking, but it seemed like they didn't understand Zero's sentiments. Suddenly, Lily entered the room with some sweets. Zero then asked why she came over, since he knew bringing the sweets over was just an excuse. Lily then asked what Zero would do next, even though they knew Grace wanted to keep him beside her. Zero then confessed that he couldn't go along with what Grace wanted, since nothing good could come from having a guy like him close to her. Lily was surprised, and Zero asked why she was surprised. Lily claimed she was just relieved that Zero understood the situation. She could see that Zero was not a bad person at all and thanked him for the effort of helping Grace. She claimed leaving the castle would also be better for Zero's sake. She claimed there was something weird with the capital and Zero was someone unique and for sure he would get involved one way or another. Zero agreed since he was an otherworlder after all. Lily exclaimed that was not only the case. She knew that Zero could see the spirits. She knew that after seeing him talk to himself and doing weird things. He claimed it was only Amorous who hadn't noticed it so far. Zero then asked why it was better for him to leave the castle. Lily then assumed that the Spirit Liberation Troop was lurking inside the castle. Zero kind of agreed, since they went directly to the eastern village to look for them. Lily then assumed they had connections to important figures of the country, and if they learned about Zero's abilities, they would stop at nothing to get it. Zero agreed that his ability was unique and his existence might get targeted. However, he worried that Grace would be in more danger. Lily was surprised and Zero wondered what was wrong. Lily claimed she didn't expect Zero to easily believe her. Zero then called her an idiot and flicked her forehead. He claimed if he didn't believe her, then who would he believe in this world? On top of that, he knew that Lily's loyalty toward Grace was genuine. Lily then confessed that just like Grace, she wanted Zero to stay in the castle since he was her first ally aside from her and Amorous. She apologized to Zero, but he was fine with it since he also didn't want to put any of them in danger. Zero started patting Lily's head and the maid asked him to stop it. Zero then decided to pack up his things so he could leave early at dawn. At dawn, Zero was glad Lily helped him sneak out of the castle. He thanked her and Lily asked him to be careful of the Spirit Liberation Troop. Zero claimed he knew that already, and walked away while cursing her out one last time. Lily blushed and retorted an insult back. Zero walked quite a distance and wondered what he should do next. He asked suggestions from the little ones but discovered that their number had increased. Currently, Zero's worries were related to the little ones, the Black Rock, and the Spirit Liberation Troop. He also needed to know more about the world and worry about himself. He didn't want to get involved with the Spirit Liberation Troop after seeing the little ones' worried faces. Zero was not sure if he could do anything by himself in this world, but he must do something for those who put their trust in him. A spirit then gave him a pat, and Zero realized that he was not alone. He decided not to worry further and for now decided to go to the nearest village. It wasn't long ago that Zero arrived in this world and met the little ones and other people. Currently, he was at Iruji's asking if his cooking was good. Zero had met him again after returning to Kalit Town. He claimed the food was good but a bit lacking. After the meal, the two had hot chocolate, and Iruji asked why Zero had come alone without the red-haired Missy. Zero froze for a moment, then recalled Grace being excited about adventuring together. Zero told Iruji that he had left Grace behind in the royal capital. Iruji was shocked and concluded that Zero had fought with his wife. Zero exclaimed that Grace was not his wife. Iruji was simply surprised that Zero had returned to him alone. He thought he had seen a ghost or something when Zero appeared outside his window. He honestly thought he was ascending to heaven at that time. Zero then shared how he wanted to find something but lacked acquaintances to ask. Iruji didn't know how an old man like him could help, but he offered his assistance. Zero was glad and asked Iruji if he knew about the black egg-shaped stone. Unfortunately, Iruji didn't have any idea about it. Zero then assumed that Iruji didn't know about the Spirit Liberation Troop either. Iruji explained that it was something he knew. Zero asked if he was serious. Iruji claimed they were his normal customers, buying a lot of weapons from him before. Zero couldn't believe Iruji had sold weapons to a dangerous group. Iruji looked confused, saying he only knew that the group wanted to liberate the spirits. Zero suddenly felt a contradicting feeling. He had seen a glimpse of them and they all looked suspicious wearing black robes. He didn't really know if they were going to kidnap the block-headed sisters. He wondered if Amorous was lying to him. He still wanted to trust her and her words. Iruji then shared how destructive a weapon can be depending on the user and how they use it. He reminded Zero that he had also given him a weapon. Zero wondered what Iruji was implying. Iruji asked if the Spirit Liberation Troop really wanted to hurt people. For Iruji, it wasn't about supporting the group, but he agreed that people could still live without the spirits in the world. Coming from a world without spirits, Zero thought that people could live properly without magic. It was his first time meeting someone with the same mentality, and he wondered if the Spirit Liberation Troop shared the same views. Zero got confused, thinking of the Spirit Liberation Troop as the good guys. Iruji called him weird, saying that most people would immediately reject the idea of liberating the spirits, but Zero was someone who contemplated it. Zero claimed that a lot of things had happened. Iruji was interested in his story, but he shared that he didn't know if the kingdom or the Spirit Liberation Troop was right or wrong. He advised Zero to throw away his prejudices about good and evil, and decide for himself after observing everything with his own eyes. Zero recalled that most people in this world agreed with the kingdom, and only a few shared the Spirit Liberation Troops' views. Zero agreed that he wouldn't understand anything right now, and decided to start figuring out what to do next. He asked Aruji if he knew anything else about the Spirit Liberation Troop. Aruji recalled the group mentioning the Great Spirits. Zero asked for further details, but Aruji didn't know anything beyond blacksmithing. Zero jokingly called Aruji a useless old man. Zero set off in the morning, bidding farewell to Aruji. He decided to return to the forest with the little ones first and then visit the nearby villages and towns to gather information. After that, Zero could decide what to do on his own. It didn't take long for him and the spirits to return to their home. Zero enjoyed the clean air and comfortable atmosphere. Since normal people couldn't locate the forest, there was nothing to worry about. He asked the little ones if anything had changed in the forest. Someone replied that there was, and Zero asked them to lead the way. However, instead of the usual little ones, a bearded old man appeared. The old man claimed that the only difference was his presence. Zero got angry and started hitting the bearded old man, thinking he was a pervert trying to harm the spirits. The bearded old man was in pain, and the little ones were getting worried. Zero continued hitting him until the bearded old man introduced himself as the Great Spirit of Earth. The little ones with the Earth attribute then tended to the bearded old man. Zero was confused, hearing something he had just learned from Aruji. The Great Spirit of Earth asked Zero to calm down, but Zero continued to doubt him and asked for proof. The Great Spirit suggested that Zero compare his appearance to that of the little ones. Zero stared at both the Great Spirit of Earth, who looked like a familiar rock-type Pokemon, and an Earth Spirit, and the Great Spirit pointed out their similarities. However, Zero was not convinced and gave him another smack, exclaiming that they were not alike. The little ones intervened, asking Zero to stop, and he complied. The Great Spirit was relieved, and Zero warned him not to lie. Zero then asked the Great Spirit of Earth to provide actual proof of his identity. The Great Spirit reminded Zero that they were currently in the Spirit's Forest, a place that no human could enter. Zero smacked him again, pointing out that he was human himself. The Great Spirit exclaimed that there was a reason why Zero could enter the forest, and Zero was taken aback that the Great Spirit knew his name. The Great Spirit confirmed that he had known about Zero since he started living in the forest. Zero couldn't help but feel wary about the old man claiming to be the Great Spirit of Earth. However, he noticed the resemblance between the little ones and the old man. Zero asked why a human like him could enter the Spirit's forest. The Great Spirit claimed that Zero was different, and that even Zero didn't know why only he could see the spirits. Zero attributed it to the skill God had given him, but the Great Spirit disagreed, saying that the skill's purpose was to bring out Zero's true nature and enhance it. If Zero didn't have the qualities in the first place, he wouldn't have received the skill. Zero realized that he must have had the trait to be liked by the spirits from the start. The Great Spirit agreed, and Zero was shocked that his mind had been read. The Great Spirit claimed that it was not hard to read a human's heart as a Great Spirit. Zero thought of him as gross, and the Great Spirit became depressed, having read Zero's thoughts. Zero then asked what the Great Spirit of Earth wanted from him. The Great Spirit claimed that it was Zero who needed something from him instead. Zero doubted this, but started thinking about the Spirit Liberation Troop, the Black Stone, and other things on his mind. Seeing the Great Spirit of Earth show up, Zero assumed that he knew something and decided to ask him thoroughly. The Great Spirit teasingly asked him to start right away. Zero's questions began with the identity of the spirits. The Great Spirit of Earth explained that spirits were creatures necessary for the existence of the world, as they gave birth to mana. Zero was confused, as this differed from what he had heard before. The Great Spirit explained that magic couldn't be used without mana, and that the absence of spirits would mean the absence of magic. However, Zero recalled Grace using magic without a spirit contract. The Great Spirit hoped Zero understood something by now. The Great Spirit pointed out that it was all thanks to the spirits that mana existed in the world, and if they disappeared, mana would run dry and no one would be able to use magic. Zero could understand that. The Great Spirit then mentioned that the world's mana was currently in disarray and would soon disappear. Zero was shocked and asked him to slow down. It was like a huge bomb had dropped on Zero. Learning that the world was in disarray, the Great Spirit suggested Zero should figure it out by himself. Zero angrily told him not to kid with him and assumed that even the Great Spirit didn't know why. The Great Spirit of Earth then instructed Zero to meet the other Great Spirits, and he would learn about the Black Stone and the Spirit Liberation Troop's goal. Zero was taken aback that the shady Great Spirit even knew about those two topics. The Great Spirit also pointed out how Zero would learn who and what he really was. Zero was taken aback and wondered what the Great Spirit of Earth was talking about. The Great Spirit already knew that Zero kept thinking about why he was different from other humans. He claimed Zero would fully understand soon and hoped Zero could decide things for himself. He then touched Zero's mithril pipe and the weapon suddenly lit up. A bead appeared. along with 3 more blank spots. Zero asked what it was. The Great Spirit of Earth then shared that to save the spirits, Zero should meet the other Great Spirits. He shared the location of the rest of the Great Spirits: the Great Spirit of Fire in the south, the Great Spirit of Wind in the west, and the Great Spirit of Water in the north. After getting their powers, Zero should offer his weapon to the altar. Confused, Zero asked what the altar was, the power of the Great Spirits, and his words about saving the spirits. However, the Great Spirit of Earth had already started disappearing with a smile, totally ignoring Zero's questions. Zero exclaimed that they were not done talking. The Great Spirit of Earth hoped Zero understood what he shared and reminded him to meet the other Great Spirits. He wanted Zero to make a decision after he learned something about himself. Zero told him to stop disappearing. The Great Spirit of Earth left, hoping they would meet again soon. A lot of questions flooded Zero's thoughts. He wondered if the self-proclaimed god had some secret being kept away from him. He wondered why the little ones needed some saving. Zero then wrote down a list of objectives. Because of the Great Spirit of Earth, his list had become longer. It was full of things that Zero didn't know, and after a night of thinking, he realized there were more things he needed to find out. Amorous' parting gifts, a map and a pen, proved to be useful now. Since his current location was in the southeast and recalling that the Great Spirit of Earth was from the east, Zero decided to go to the south where it was relatively close. After a day in the forest he considered home, it was time for Zero to set out again. However, along the way he heard a familiar scream. He sensed a feeling of déjà vu, hearing someone ask for help. Yes, it was Grace once again. Grace noticed Zero's scary glare and called him a monster. However, she quickly recognized him and asked him not to give her that glare. She hid behind him, asking to be saved. Goblins then appeared, and Zero couldn't help but recall how useless Grace was. He scolded her, knowing that she had already powered up her magic since contracting a spirit. Grace claimed she had already burned most of them to dust but had ended up using most of her mana pool. She tried to make an excuse by acting cute, but Zero was not buying it. Grace apologized in the end. Grace then went back to the main concern and asked if they should run away. Zero refused, saying he would happily beat down the goblins. Grace called him a muscle brain. Zero charged toward the goblins, exclaiming that he didn't want to hear such words from Grace. He grabbed the trusty stone axe he had from the start and threw it at one of the goblins. The other goblins were distracted, and Zero used this chance to smack one of them with the mithril pipe. One tried to crawl away, but Zero stepped on its leg. Zero wore a villainous face, unlike his status as the main character of this story. Zero then instructed Grace to provide some support and lifted his bloodied mithril pipe. He saw 3 more goblins left, but their number was somehow scaring him a bit. The goblins noticed Zero flinch and got scared, using this chance to overpower him. However, Zero was only acting, claiming he would never be scared of them. Zero asked Grace to do what she could. Grace, who had just finished casting, fired off balls of fire toward the remaining goblins. The goblins were burned to a crisp, and Zero noticed one survivor. The poor goblin would meet its fate in front of the mithril pipe. Soon after, Grace commended their good teamwork. Zero then pinched her cheeks and asked why she was in the area. Grace complained that her cheeks hurt and tried to explain that she was trying to chase him. Zero told her coldly to leave. Grace cried and called him cruel. Zero wondered why a busy princess was out of the castle. Moreover, he assumed Grace knew the reason why he left unannounced in the first place. Zero then asked how Grace managed to locate him. Grace claimed it was all within her calculations. Zero asked what she even meant by that and wondered if it was fine for her to leave the castle. Grace exclaimed she got the permission. However, Zero doubted that the king would let Grace go on her own. Grace claimed she already got recognized thanks to the lizardmen's subjugation. Zero recalled that, but he still smelled something fishy going on. Zero was glad that Grace got the permission to go out and asked her what she would do next. Grace happily exclaimed that she would follow Zero. Zero asked if there was anything aside from that, but Grace insisted on following Zero and got closer to him. Zero then pushed her off and complained about how hot it was already due to the weather. Grace exclaimed she would follow Zero regardless. Zero then sighed and claimed they would go meet the Great Spirit of Fire together. Grace was glad to hear that she was a part of Zero's journey. However, she didn't know anything about the Great Spirit. Zero claimed he met a perverted one already. He claimed he should meet them regardless. Grace didn't really understand what was happening, but as long as Zero was with her, everything would work out. However, Grace wondered where the Great Spirit lived, considering that they were going south. Zero then paused and realized that he had also no idea where to go. He was only told to head south by the Great Spirit of Earth. Grace couldn't believe even Zero didn't know. Zero then claimed they were looking for a forest. Since one of the Great Spirits was residing in a forest, he assumed it would be the same case for the others. However, Grace pointed out that there were no forests in the south since it was full of volcanoes, ores, and minerals. Zero was at his wit's end, as he didn't know where to go with no hints at all. He then noticed the little ones and realized they must know something. He spread out his map and made the spirits check where they should go. The spirits then happily pointed out on the map where to go next. Seeing Zero's finger pointing in a specific area, Grace screamed in confusion. Zero was surprised and asked what was wrong with her. Grace exclaimed that the area was the Fuse volcano, a dangerous and forbidden place. Zero understood and decided to go. Grace claimed it was a dangerous place. Zero exclaimed it was fine and gave Grace a pat on the head. He fully trusted the little ones. Soon after, Zero complained about hearing Grace's constant nagging. Grace mentioned that Fuse volcano, their destination, was a restricted area. However, Zero didn't care and focused only on reaching his goal. He suggested they should start thinking about more important preparations. Grace then brought up the idea of planning their method of travel. Zero agreed that they needed fire-resistant gear. Grace, frustrated, explained that she was talking about transportation and asked if Zero really intended to go on foot. Zero confirmed that he would indeed walk to the volcano, which led to more complaints from Grace. Zero reminded her that she always got sick in carriages, and besides, no carriage would go to a restricted zone. He then told her to return to the castle first to get a carriage for the first part of the journey. Suddenly, Grace broke into a cold sweat and fell silent. Zero asked if she was paying attention. Grace claimed she was and explained that the carriage they used before was currently under maintenance. She added that Lily would bring it after repairs were done. Finally, Grace suggested they just walk after all. Zero found it ironic since Grace had been the one complaining about walking in the first place. Grace nervously laughed it off, saying she had forgotten about the carriage being repaired. Zero felt something odd about her behavior. Out of nowhere, Zero sensed something coming from the woods and warned Grace. Their faces turned pale as a huge plant-like monster with a flower for a head and thorny vines emerged. Zero was shocked at the sight of it. Grace explained that it was a dead flower, a creature that usually stayed in forests. These monsters fed on animal corpses and only attacked when provoked. However, the same peaceful flower suddenly chased them like a predator hunting its prey. Grace found it strange and thought it might be related to the monsters being more active in the area. Since she could use fire magic, Grace wanted to burn the monster. But Zero told her to keep running because they didn't need to fight it. He suddenly grabbed Grace's hand, which made her feel embarrassed. The two kept running while holding hands, and Grace enjoyed the moment. Zero told her to stop talking and just run. But while they were running, Zero suddenly tripped. His leg got caught by some vines and lifted him into the air. Zero cursed at the plant monster and pulled out his mithril pipe, but his attacks couldn't cut the vines. When he saw the monster's mouth up close, Zero realized it was about to eat him. He wondered if he could kill it from the inside of its stomach. Then he asked Grace to blast the monster with her fire magic, thinking they could easily burn it since it was a plant. Without hesitation, Grace fired a huge fireball at the monster, but the creature used Zero as a shield. Grace watched as Zero fell to the ground. Zero couldn't believe the monster had smartly used him as cover. While Zero tried to figure out what to do, Grace was heartbroken over the death of her husband and thought about joining him in the afterlife. But first, she wanted to punish the monster. She burned it to ashes with one powerful attack, and the monster exploded into pieces. After making sure the monster was dead, Grace decided to end her own life. Just then, Zero stood up to stop her. Grace asked, worried, if Zero was really okay. Zero complained that his body hurt. He couldn't believe a day had come where he would almost be burned alive. Grace felt relieved that Zero was still alive. Zero was thankful that Grace hadn't used her strongest spell from the start, otherwise he would have died for real. But Grace was confused because she didn't remember holding back. Zero couldn't believe Grace nearly became his killer. Grace pointed out that it was the monster she was trying to kill. She also complained that Zero didn't let her attack the monster right away. Zero felt guilty and admitted that it was his fault. Then shyly, he thanked Grace for saving him this time. Grace was happy she could help him and asked him to correct how he addressed her. Zero realized that the armor was the reason he wasn't hurt. He decided to be more careful next time, and Grace promised not to hit him again. Zero said he needed a sharp weapon instead of something blunt like his pipe. Grace agreed, saying that a sword or knife would be better since she herself used a staff. Zero excitedly said he wanted a Japanese knife because it could easily cut plants and would be useful in battles. Grace couldn't help but sigh at Zero's odd weapon choices. Zero decided they should visit a town on the way to Fuse Volcano. But first they needed to rest after the battle. Soon after, Zero complained about how hot it was. Grace explained that the area was influenced by the Fuse Volcano, and all the plants around were tropical. Zero noticed that the number of rock and fire spirits had increased again. Naturally, he formed a contract with them. He wondered if there was a limit to how many contracts he could make since he'd been forming them quite often. But since he didn't notice any issues, he decided it was fine. However, he began to worry about the large number of spirits following him around. Grace mentioned that she was comfortable with the temperature because she could use fire magic. She assumed someone like Zero would also be fine. Not wanting to lose face, Zero firmly said he was fine. He then accepted a cup of water from her and thanked her for her water magic. Grace replied that Lily could do better and mentioned that using magic outside of her own attribute required more mana. Zero praised Grace for holding up well since they had been walking for over 10 days. Grace credited the special spirit medicine that Zero had given her, saying it helped her recover at the end of each exhausting day. Zero admitted that he couldn't do much without the little spirits and their support. He then sincerely thanked them. Soon after, the couple arrived at the mining town of Fura, where everything seemed interesting to Zero. Grace explained that Fura was a place where people could find valuable ores and get rich easily. However, she wasn't comfortable in such places because the people looked intimidating. Still, in her eyes, they were nothing compared to Zero. She then suggested they find a place to stay and something to eat. She also mentioned wanting to take a bath after their long journey. Zero decided to take things easy after the long trip. Suddenly, someone ordered them to stop. A group of soldiers blocked their path and one of them called out Amaris's name. Zero felt confused when he heard the familiar name, but Grace suddenly became anxious. Amaris appeared, glaring at the couple. Zero asked Grace why Amaris was there, and when he saw Grace looking guilty, he realized the foolish princess had snuck out of the castle. Zero tried to greet Amaris, but the princess angrily called him a bastard and ordered him to stay quiet. When Zero tried to speak again, Amaris pointed a sword at his face. He understood then that she wasn't there for a friendly conversation. Amaris claimed she didn't expect Zero to be so foolish. Zero was about to respond, but suddenly, an explosion went off. Grace told Zero to run. The smoke from the explosion distracted Amaris and her soldiers, and they could only watch as the couple ran away. Zero asked Grace for an explanation, but she promised to explain everything once they escaped. As Zero suspected, Grace was the one at fault. As the smoke cleared, Amaris shouted Zero's name loudly and blamed him for using magic in the town. Zero quickly denied it, saying he couldn't use magic at all. Grace told him to stop making excuses and to focus on running instead. Zero, frustrated, blamed Grace, saying she should be the one apologizing for something. As they kept running, Grace spotted a familiar carriage in the distance. Lily was driving it and called out to them to get on. Grace felt relieved to see her trusted maid. Surprised, Zero asked why Lily was there too. Lily hurriedly told him to get on quickly because Amaris was coming. Grace helped Zero climb in, though he wasn't fully inside yet. From far away, a furious Amaris was chasing them on foot, her sword crackling with lightning magic. She screamed that she would kill Zero, but he had no idea what he had done wrong. Grace told him to move aside, leaving Zero confused. Without hesitation, Grace cast a powerful spell at her own sister, which left Zero stunned. In the end, the two of them only stayed in the city for 30 minutes. They escaped by using Lily's ice magic to block the wrecked southern gate. Zero and the others were worried because from any angle, they looked like a group of terrorists. Once they reached safety, Zero demanded an explanation from Grace about why Amaris was after him. Lily rudely told him to calm down since the situation was getting serious. She also scolded Grace for leaving her behind. Zero, still confused, asked what was really going on. Grace hid behind Lily, remaining silent. Lily then explained to Zero that he was currently suspected of trying to overthrow the royal family. Zero was shocked and wondered what was happening. He angrily asked why he was being accused of treason. Lily then explained that everyone believed Zero had kidnapped Grace because she was missing. Zero trembled with anger as he glared at Grace. In the end, he lost his temper and blamed Grace for causing everything. Grace apologized, crying. Once things calmed down, Lily informed him that Amaris was acting on her own to catch Zero, but a bounty would be issued soon. Zero realized that he could explain everything to Amaris and prove he didn't kidnap Grace. Grace and Lily exchanged worried looks, and Zero asked what was wrong. Lily revealed that the charges of kidnapping and treason were just excuses. She explained that they didn't care about the truth. They simply wanted to capture Zero. Zero asked why it had come to that. Grace offered to explain. She said that Zero was also the reason she ran away from the castle. She revealed that Zero's secret ability to see spirits had been leaked inside the castle. Zero angrily asked how they found out. Grace didn't know, but those who learned about his ability were determined to capture him. She added that her clueless sister didn't know the real reason, and Zero realized that Amaris wasn't thinking things through. Lily then shared how she had tried to get the information to Grace, but the princess had already run off from the castle. Grace apologized for that. Curious, Zero had asked how some people discovered his abilities and how they planned to use him once they captured him. Lily had said that Zero was already standing out on his own, as she mentioned before. His behavior seemed odd, like talking to himself. She suspected that the Spirit Liberation Army had sneaked into the capital and had been watching Zero. Zero had been surprised to hear this and asked how the Spirit Liberation Army had managed to control the chivalric order. Lily had guessed that some members of the Liberation Army had infiltrated the upper ranks of the country, and only a few people could have done that. From what Grace knew, those trying to capture him were the commander of the chivalric order, Gomelas, and the minister. Zero had been shocked but couldn't remember them at all. The girls had found it hard to believe. Grace had reminded him of the gorilla-like man with the scary face and the plain old man who had given them the Lizard Man quest. Zero had finally remembered them and told the girls to stop saying mean things about them. Zero then wondered why those old men wanted to capture him. Grace didn't really know the Spirit Liberation Army's goal, but as she had explained before, the power of spirits was unmatched for them, as they could gain enormous strength by making contracts with multiple spirits. When Zero heard that, he froze and looked at the little ones following him. He now understood the situation and realized Grace had been trying to help him. He also knew Lily came to assist Grace. Grace apologized for not explaining everything from the beginning and hadn't expected Zero to be accused of treason. Zero patted her head and reassured her that it wasn't her fault. Grace also apologized to Lily for acting on her own. Lily said it was her fault for being useless and rude to Grace. Grace then held Lily's hand and said she was fine with Lily's true personality. Lily felt embarrassed by this. Grace told her to act like her real self. Lily said she was just a maid, but Grace insisted that it didn't matter, especially in front of Zero's scary face. She declared they were friends, regardless of their status. After hearing that, Lily rudely addressed Grace the same way Zero did, and Grace quickly rejected it. Shortly after, Lily asked Zero what they should do next. Zero didn't know either, but the only idea that came to his mind was to let himself get captured. He then asked the girls to at least inform Amorous about what was happening and stay with her since it would be safer. He understood how reckless Amorous could be, but he believed her strength and her feelings for Grace would be enough. However, the girls strongly disagreed and asked what would happen to Zero. He couldn't reveal himself to the Liberation Army yet because he still didn't understand their main goal. Just then, a fire spirit noticed something strange and Zero asked what was wrong. He soon realized the nearby volcano was starting to smoke. He decided to head to Fuse Volcano. Lily scolded him for not listening to them. He remembered the volcano was a restricted area, where even the knights wouldn't dare to enter. Lily called him foolish and reckless for choosing to go there, saying it wouldn't make a difference. But Zero replied that it would, because the Great Spirit of Fire was inside the volcano. The next day, Zero decided to stop using the carriage. Grace, in a cheerful mood, asked if they were giving up on going to Fuse Volcano, especially since it was a restricted area. Zero got upset and corrected her, saying they were only giving up on the carriage, not the trip. He explained that the area was too dangerous for carriages, making it hard to keep going with it. Lily agreed to leave the carriage behind and continue on foot. Grace felt sad and waved goodbye to their beloved carriage. Soon after, Zero complained that the place was getting hotter as they went on. Lily said it was expected and added that she didn't mind the heat. Zero pointed out that Lily was cooling herself with ice magic. Realizing something, Zero picked Lily up and carried her on his shoulders, saying his plan was perfect because now he could feel the cool air. Lily asked him to let her go, but Zero teased her, asking why she was embarrassed. Meanwhile, Grace, the jealous wife, asked about their destination again. Zero cheerfully told her they were heading to the top of the volcano. Grace, however, wasn't listening and was upset with Lily. Lily then punched Zero, demanding to be let down. Zero angrily said that Lily wouldn't lose anything by helping him, but she replied that he didn't understand at all. At that moment, the little ones pointed in the same direction. Zero looked up and saw only a cliff. Grace worriedly asked if they were going to climb it. Lily wondered if Zero was thinking straight but then realized that the spirits were guiding him. Zero confirmed this. Grace, feeling jealous, claimed she knew it was the spirits the whole time. After the exhausting climb, Zero asked the spirits where to go next. They pointed to an area where nothing seemed to be there. Everyone felt confused because there was nothing in sight. Grace suggested they search around more. Suddenly, the ground shook, leaving everyone even more confused. Zero thought it was an earthquake at first, but the ground beneath them started cracking. He told the girls to move away, but he was too late to warn them. The three fell into a hole that opened in the ground. Zero woke up feeling sore all over. He remembered the first time he came to this world, when he met the little ones. He quickly got up and asked if everyone was okay. He noticed the spirits looked sad and asked them what was wrong. Then he realized how far they had fallen and reassured the spirits not to worry because he was fine. He asked where the girls were and found them unconscious and bleeding. To his surprise, they got up quickly. Lily asked what had happened and checked on Grace. Grace wondered the same and was surprised it didn't hurt. Zero pointed to the spot where they had fallen from and the girls were shocked. Lily was amazed they were still fine after such a big fall. Zero said it was a close call and thanked the little one's medicine for saving them. Then Grace became sad, and Zero asked why. She said she was jealous of Zero for being able to see and talk to the spirits. She wanted to thank them for saving them. Lily agreed and jokingly called Zero a maggot. Zero had asked what to do next since they couldn't climb back. Lily looked around and believed they weren't stuck after all. Grace also noticed a bright light at the end of the tunnel that might lead outside. They had no choice but to walk along the path in front of them. After a while, they finally reached the end of the tunnel and found a pool of lava. Even for Grace, who could control fire, the heat was too much. Lily asked Zero what to do next and suggested they explore another area. However, Zero insisted they were in the right place. He didn't really understand why, but he was certain what he was looking for was there. Zero stepped forward and called for the Great Fire Spirit, knowing it was there, but all he got in return was silence. The girls thought he looked foolish for shouting so confidently, only for nothing to happen. Just as Zero began to feel embarrassed, the ground started to shake. Everyone was shocked by the sudden event, and something emerged from the lava pool. Zero's eyes widened as a massive dragon appeared before them. Seeing a monster in front of them, Grace had suggested that they run away. Zero asked her to calm down for a moment since the dragon hadn't done anything yet. Grace, worried, exclaimed that the monster in front of them was a dragon that could breathe fire at any moment. Zero told her to be quiet for a bit. He was feeling the same presence as before and believed he wasn't mistaken. The Great Fire Spirit was nearby. He then boldly asked the dragon about the Great Spirit, trying to confirm if this was who he had been searching for. The girls called him crazy for casually talking to a dragon. The dragon glared at him, complaining about how a mere human dared to step into its territory. Realizing the dragon could talk, Zero explained that he was looking for the Great Fire Spirit. However, the dragon didn't care and wanted to punish them instead. Zero suggested they run, but Grace insisted it was too late and that she and Lily could handle the situation. Lily agreed and began casting her strongest ice magic. The dragon breathed fire and Lily used her ice magic to block it. An explosion occurred, throwing everyone to the ground. Zero got back up and checked on the girls. He then saw the dragon preparing to breathe fire at Grace. Grace had no time to escape and could only stand there helplessly, realizing she was about to die. Even Zero knew Grace wouldn't survive the attack despite being a fire user. He rushed toward her trying to reach her. Suddenly a shield appeared covering both of them. Lily got back up and checked on the two. Zero felt something warm and hoped Grace was okay. He opened his eyes when Lily called his name and found himself hugging a flustered Grace. He was shocked to see that they were both alive and unharmed. He quickly pushed Grace aside, wondering why he hadn't been hurt. Just then, the dragon started complaining to someone for lending their power to Zero while being bound to it. The dragon asked why they were protecting a mere human. The spirits formed a barrier in front of Zero as if shielding him. Zero was stunned to see the spirits surrounding them. He realized they had protected him from the dragon's attack. Suddenly, someone came over and asked the dragon to stop. A man in burning armor appeared, leaving everyone confused. The dragon couldn't believe that even the Great Fire Spirit was siding with a human. The Great Fire Spirit pointed at Zero and asked the dragon what he saw. Confused, the dragon asked what the spirit meant. He then froze as he stared at Zero again and finally understood why. Zero, on the other hand, had no idea what the dragon was talking about. The Great Fire Spirit then told the dragon to leave things to him. The dragon agreed and respected his request to leave for now. Zero watched as the dragon walked away. The girls thought they were safe now thanks to the person who had just appeared. The Great Fire Spirit praised Zero for coming and introduced himself formally. Zero was surprised that another Great Spirit knew who he was. Grace suddenly shouted, asking why she could see the Great Spirit. The spirit explained that unlike regular spirits, humans could see him. Zero realized that the others could also see the perverted old man. Lily was shocked that the Great Spirit was really in Fuse Volcano. Zero couldn't believe Lily had been doubting him the whole time. Zero thanked the Great Fire Spirit for saving them, but the spirit corrected him, saying it was the smaller spirits who saved them. When Zero turned to thank the spirits, he suddenly saw one of them fading away. He asked what was going on, and the Great Fire Spirit mentioned that it was something he had been planning to tell him. When Zero asked what he meant, the little spirit suddenly turned into a familiar black stone. Grace, who had been blinded by the sudden flash of light, asked what happened. She soon saw the familiar black stone in Zero's hand. Zero looked at the Great Spirit, confused. The spirit explained that the stone came from a spirit that had fallen asleep after using up all its magic power. Zero was shocked by this. The Great Spirit went on to say that spirits were made of magic power, and people would borrow some of that magic when they used it. However, spirits weren't supposed to release their magic on their own. When the dragon attacked, one of the spirits must have used all its magic to protect Zero. Since it used up all its magic, it turned into a black stone. Zero and the others couldn't believe something like this could happen. The Great Spirit then asked if Zero now understood the true goal of the Spirit Liberation Army. The Great Spirit asked again if Zero understood, but Zero angrily told him to be quiet. He pointed out that they were supposed to discuss the little one turning into a black stone. Zero then remembered the little one who had gone to sleep and said he didn't care about the Spirit Liberation Army's goal of freeing the spirits at all. Grace and Lily worried as they saw Zero feeling upset. The Great Spirit of Fire then asked if Zero even knew why the Spirit Liberation Army wanted to free the spirits in the first place. Zero thought it was for the little one's freedom, but the Great Spirit pressed him, asking why they wanted to set them free. Zero admitted he didn't know at all. Suddenly, the Great Spirit of Fire cast a spell on Zero's mithril pipe, adding a new bead to the empty slots. He instructed Zero to meet the Great Wind Spirit next to learn who he really was. After Zero met all the spirits, the Great Spirit wanted him to make a decision. As the Great Spirit began to fade away, Zero shouted that he still had many questions. The Great Spirit left him with a few words, saying that there was no time left. Zero couldn't believe the Great Spirit had just talked and then disappeared. Grace asked if Zero was okay. He requested some space, saying he also wanted to check on the little ones. As he looked at them, he wondered why someone like him was protected by the fire spirit that had turned into a black stone. He only knew that it had protected him and then gone to sleep. He blamed himself for being weak. An earth spirit then comforted Zero. He didn't forget to thank the others for saving him. He realized he shouldn't act depressed and needed to think about his next move. He didn't want to see the little ones turn into black stones. Just then, Zero realized something. He thought the Spirit Liberation Army's goal was to prevent bad things from happening to the little ones. He remembered the Great Earth Spirit saying that the spirits were made from magic energy, and hinted that there was a disturbance in the magic energy of the world he was in. He wondered if the disturbance was connected to the little ones turning into black stones. However, he heard the Spirit Liberation Army using the black stones and questioned their purpose for using them. Without knowing anything despite his many questions, Zero shouted out in frustration and slapped himself. Grace became worried, and Lily asked if Zero had finally lost his mind. Zero insisted he was fine, but his head was bleeding a lot. The girls could see he was not okay at all. He then told them they would head west next. Grace urged him to treat his wound first. Suddenly, someone told them to wait. Amaris and her soldiers had finally caught up with them. Lily stepped forward to protect Grace. Amaris then asked what had just happened. Zero asked what she meant. Thinking she had overheard his conversation with the Great Fire Spirit, he claimed he would meet the Great Wind Spirit, just like Amaris had heard. Amaris questioned what Zero was planning, and noticing the black stone in his hand, wondered what was really going on. Zero admitted he didn't know. Amaris got angry at him. Zero exclaimed that he didn't know what was happening at all, which was why he was doing whatever he could. Grace intervened and asked her big sister to let them go. She explained that she had learned a lot since traveling with Zero. She discovered how humans gave energy to spirits and how the spirits strengthened it. But that was wrong from the start. Thanks to Zero, she learned that spirits were actually made of magic energy and that they gave power to humans. When their magic energy ran out, they turned into black stones. Understanding this made her feel sad, and she was about to cry. Zero suddenly patted Amaris's head. He told her that he no longer cared about the rumors of him kidnapping Grace. Instead, they would visit the next Great Spirit together for the sake of the little ones. He warned her that anyone who got in their way would be blown away. Amaris started laughing and mentioned that a bounty had been placed on Zero's capture alive. She pointed out that he couldn't travel freely like that. Zero insisted he could defeat anyone who came after him. Amaris exclaimed that wasn't the point. Grace then realized something and whispered to Zero. She revealed that Amaris actually wanted to travel with him. Amaris was surprised to be found out and began to blush. Zero couldn't help but laugh evilly. Embarrassed, Amaris claimed she could help with many things. Her underlings couldn't help but think their leader was cute and swore to follow her for the rest of their lives. Amaris asked if she could join their team. Grace gave her a doubtful look and reminded her that she and her soldiers had tried to capture them. Amaris explained that she genuinely believed she was being kidnapped at that time. The soldiers were completely smitten by their leader's cuteness. Grace then apologized for running away from home without telling her. She asked Amaris to believe that everything she did was her own choice because she really wanted to travel with Zero no matter what. She knew Amaris's powers would be useful for the team and asked her to join them. Amaris was thrilled and gave Grace a warm hug. To Zero and Lily, it looked like a doting sisterly moment. Lily then expressed that she didn't trust Amaris. Zero replied that Amaris wasn't a bad person and he believed she would be helpful in their fight against the chivalric order. Lily was impressed by how Zero viewed Amaris as a tool. Zero thought that was better than being captured and used by the gorilla. Lily couldn't help but agree. Soon after, Amaris helped the others escape from the volcano's cavern. She then told her soldiers that she would join Zero's group and ordered them to return and protect the king instead. With 3 hints in his mind, Zero still didn't understand anything at all. He remembered how the Great Fire Spirit had instructed him to meet all the Great Spirits and make a decision. Zero realized that worrying wouldn't help at all. For now, he needed to head west to save the little ones. On their way, a soldier told Zero's group that Amorous had caused a big commotion in the castle, defending Grace and Zero's actions. Zero learned that after he was falsely accused of treason and Grace went missing, Amorous had gathered a few trusted soldiers and left the castle. Amorous tried to silence the soldier, but he insisted that Zero didn't seem like someone who would commit treason. He remembered how Zero had behaved properly in front of the king. Zero apologized for the misunderstanding, but realized that these soldiers were good people. One soldier reassured him, saying they had noticed something strange about the situation too. In addition to being soldiers, they were members of the Amorous fan club, ready to support her no matter what. They even joked about wanting to be punished as a reward. Zero changed his mind. They were good people, but they were also quite a rowdy group. Even the spirits were taken aback. The soldiers expressed their desire to join Zero, but they needed to follow Amorous's orders to return to the castle and protect the king. They asked Zero to take care of Amorous and Grace. Zero assured them not to worry. Amorous told them to be quiet and insisted she could protect herself. She then asked if they were heading west. Grace mentioned that the Great Wind Spirit lived in the west and pointed to a spot on the map. Zero noticed a building there and asked Grace if she knew anything about it. Grace explained that she had heard a god lived in the western desert, known as the Great Wind God. Zero protested, unable to believe that such an obvious building had been erected there. He asked if the Wind God was the same as the Wind Spirit. Grace didn't know either, which made Zero feel frustrated with her. He sighed and called everything stupid. Then he decided to meet the Great Wind God. Grace suggested that Zero should rest in a nearby city first. Zero replied that it would take too long to get the carriage and chose to continue without it. A soldier warned him that it would be dangerous to return to the city since a bounty had recently been placed on Zero. Additionally, Grace had destroyed the city and was labeled a terrorist. The soldiers then offered to get the carriage while the group rested at a nearby onsen. The girls became excited at this idea. Lily looked concerned while Zero seemed confused. The group soon arrived at the nearby onsen. Grace was the first to enter, followed by Lily, who was worried about joining the princess. Grace exclaimed that they were friends and it was fine for them to enter the onsen together. She even asked Amorous for confirmation. However, Grace's eyes widened when she saw her sister's bare skin and beautiful figure. Amorous reassured her that there was no problem with Lily being there. Grace turned away looking angry. Amorous asked what was wrong, but Grace insisted it was nothing. Amorous became worried that her sister might hate her. Grace felt it was unfair that her sister had a better shape and bigger size than she did. Then she realized something, and her jealous side took over, assuming that Zero preferred the bigger side. In a fit of anger, she grabbed Amorous's melons and began to feel them. She discovered how squishy, soft, and sensitive they were, realizing it could even be enjoyable for the same gender. Grace comforted herself by thinking that at least she was still bigger than a board. At that moment, she saw Lily glaring at her. Lily then mentioned that some men preferred someone like her. Grace denied it and told her to stop reading her mind. Amorous asked Grace to stop shouting because everyone could hear them. The members of the Amorous fan club felt lucky to overhear. Grace decided to get aggressive and planned to attack Zero's side, but the other girls stopped her. Meanwhile, Zero was enjoying the onsen, feeling his tiredness wash away. Even though the noisy neighbor kept shouting his name, he didn't mind. It felt like heaven to him, bathing alongside the spirits. The day ended quietly with Grace's plan never happening. The next morning, only Zero looked well rested while the girls remained tired despite the break. Soon after, Grace said she wanted to rest in the city where there was delicious food and a warm bed. Holding a pan, Zero scolded her because they had just soaked in a hot spring and had been enjoying warm food thanks to him and Lily. Grace pouted and said that the warm bath had been a few days ago. Zero punished her by stretching her cheeks and giving her a lecture. Then their overprotective sister Lily appeared. Lily asked the princesses to relax in the carriage while she prepared the food. She also told Zero to patrol the area. She reminded him that they were in the open plains now and pursuers could show up at any time. Zero agreed, knowing they were all fugitives charged with treason by the kingdom. The girls pointed out that only he was wanted. Even though he was annoyed with the girls, Zero went off to patrol. As Zero walked around, he complained about their situation. On top of that, he still didn't know what was happening. He kept thinking about the decision the Great Fire Spirit had mentioned. An Earth Spirit asked him what was wrong, but Zero said it was nothing. Since there was nothing to see, he decided to head back to the camp. Suddenly, he felt someone's presence behind him. He swung his mithril pipe but missed the old woman who had easily sneaked in front of him. Zero was taken aback. The old woman asked if he was out for a walk and told him not to be on guard. She invited him to sit down for a talk and called out his name. Zero was surprised and wondered how the old woman knew his name. He thought she might be the same old woman from the sweet shop nearby. The old woman told him not to compare her to the woman he was thinking about. Zero then realized that the old woman could read his mind. She giggled and suggested he think about why she appeared before him and how she could read his thoughts. She mentioned that he could have known her if he had been more careful and asked for her name. Zero understood that the old woman really could read his mind, and he didn't like it. He said there should only be one person who could do that. He then asked the old woman if he was right to call her the Great Wind Spirit. The Great Wind Spirit praised him for figuring it out. Zero felt like she was teasing him. He couldn't believe that the Great Spirit had come to him before they reached her temple. The Great Wind Spirit confirmed that she was indeed in the temple. Zero asked if she was out for a walk or something. The Great Wind Spirit said it was too far to be just walking and confirmed that she was waiting in the temple. Zero felt confused and couldn't believe she had come all the way to see him after waiting. He didn't understand why she had stepped out of the temple. He still found it frustrating that the Great Spirit spoke in such mysterious ways. He thought they were a pain and very cryptic. The Great Spirit called him rude and said she didn't want to come at that moment. Zero then realized something and asked if something had happened in the temple. Thinking that the Great Spirit had come to inform him, the old woman said he was close with his guess, which made Zero angry. The Great Spirit then mentioned that the Spirit Liberation Army was in her temple. She said it was not dangerous but still problematic. She reassured him, saying she was the only Great Spirit whose location was known to people, which was why they were watching the temple. Zero agreed that the temple was an obvious clue. Zero then asked why the Spirit Liberation Army had come. The Great Spirit explained that they planned to put up a barrier around her temple to keep people from entering and the spirits from leaving. Zero looked confused, and the Great Spirit sighed. She then started a quiz asking Zero why the Spirit Liberation Army was putting up a barrier. Zero couldn't believe he was hearing another cryptic question. The Great Spirit giggled. After thinking for a few minutes, Zero assumed the barrier was meant to keep humans away from the Great Wind Spirit. However, he realized that it would also keep the spirits away from her. The old woman told him to take his time to think carefully. She then asked what Zero had been doing all this time with the spirits. He shared that they had eaten, slept, and traveled together. He was enjoying his days as usual and thought nothing was strange at all. At that moment, he noticed the Great Spirit's serious gaze and suddenly felt that something was off. She said she couldn't give him the answer because, in the end, Zero would be the one to make a decision. She explained that people often think someone is nice if others say they are nice. Zero realized that he should not make assumptions and needed to think for himself. The Great Spirit giggled happily, which annoyed Zero. Just then, the Great Wind Spirit began to glow and fade away. She reminded him not to forget about the barrier that kept humans out and spirits in. She said she would be waiting for him in her temple. Zero remained confused by her mysterious hints. He found the Great Spirits quite annoying. There were still many things he didn't understand, but he decided to head to the Wind God Temple for now. Zero's group continued their journey by carriage and told the girls about the Great Wind Spirit and the Spirit Liberation Troop, who were camping at the temple they were headed to. When the girls mentioned they wanted to stop by a village along the way, Zero apologized for the inconvenience. Amorous asked Grace if something was wrong. Grace said she was fine with skipping the village but began to wonder why she could always see spirits. Amorous thought it might be because Zero was from another world, but Grace doubted that was the only reason. Remembering how the Great Spirit of Fire had told him to learn more about himself, Zero said he had many questions too. However, he needed to meet the Great Wind Spirit again to find out more. They should hurry since it was also important for the spirits. When they arrived near the temple, they noticed people in familiar robes. Zero wondered how they should handle the situation. The girls suggested they just go ahead and blast their enemies out of the way. Feeling deja vu, Zero told them to stop. Amorous said a strategy meeting would be pointless. Grace argued that they didn't have much time and should just use their strongest spells. Zero called them idiots, saying they'd destroy the temple in the process. Zero's loud voice caught the attention of the Spirit Liberation Army, who spotted them. Annoyed, Zero complained, and Lily pointed out that it was his fault. Since they were cornered, Zero decided to act. Grace eagerly asked if they should attack, but Zero suggested they try negotiating first. The girls were confused. Zero explained that civilized people start with words, not violence. With a friendly smile, he told the Spirit Liberation members that he wasn't suspicious and was only there to visit the temple. Zero scared them off and they started calling him the devil. Zero didn't hesitate when someone called him a devil. He complained about how he only came over to talk. He argued that anyone would snap if others suddenly yelled and attacked them like that. He insisted he was just a normal human, no matter how they saw him, and blamed them for calling him a demon. The Spirit Liberation Army scout team was then beaten up and tied to a nearby rock. Lily learned something important. Start a conversation first, then look for an opening and attack when the enemy lets their guard down. She was impressed by Zero's skill, though an upright knight like Amorous said she couldn't do something that sneaky. Grace also joined in, praising him. Zero told the girls to shut up and focus on the rest of the enemies near the temple. Just then they heard a rumbling sound and realized the enemies were using some kind of magic. When they saw the ground rise up, the girls guessed it was earth magic. A golem formed and they were shocked to see such a huge one, which must have required a lot of magic power. Zero agreed the golem was big but said they could just run past it and head straight for the temple. Amaris called him ignorant and drew her sword. The golem began to move, and Amaris warned them to assume it could move faster than they had imagined. Suddenly, the golem charged forward and Zero was shocked at how fast it was, given its large size. The girls quickly activated their magic spells and fired at the golem. It crumbled, and Zero was relieved, thinking it was weaker than expected. But Amaris told him to look again. The broken golem rapidly regenerated. Zero was startled and called the golem's ability to regenerate a cheat. Amaris explained that as long as there was earth around, the golem would keep returning to its original form. The golem attacked again, this time targeting Zero. He barely dodged the attack, tumbling to the ground. Grace shouted that the golem was still chasing him. Zero kept dodging its punches and asked what he should do. Grace noticed that the golem kept repairing itself and Lily told her to stay back. Zero wondered what to do since his regular attacks wouldn't work against something as tough as the golem. He saw that magic could damage it, but it would just heal itself. And unfortunately, Zero couldn't use magic. Then he spotted members of the Spirit Liberation Army standing behind the golem. He guessed that if he could take out the summoners, the golem might stop moving. However, the golem stood in his way. He knew he could attack the mages directly, but the golem would block him. That's when he realized a magic attack could be the solution. A sly grin spread across his face as he came up with a risky plan. He wasn't sure if it would work, but with the great wind spirit waiting for him, he had no choice but to try. He then asked Amaris to buy him some time. Amaris didn't mind but said she couldn't defeat the golem alone. Zero understood and asked her to hold on. Amaris couldn't believe how reckless Zero was. She lifted her sword and faced the massive golem. With determination, she charged at the golem on her own. Grace asked why Amaris was fighting the golem by herself. Zero quickly told Grace and Lily he had a question for them. Grace was worried about her sister, but Zero explained that Amaris was buying them time. He then asked Grace if she could increase the heat of her fire. Grace said she could, but even if they melted the golem, it would just regenerate. Zero told her to do it anyway and not to worry about the rest. Then he asked Lily if she could create a big block of ice. Lily said she could. Zero was pleased and told them to follow his instructions. Minutes later, Amaris was exhausted from fighting the golem and dealing with its regeneration. Zero apologized for making her wait. Amaris asked if he had a plan. Zero asked if she could lure the golem as close as possible to the enemies behind it and destroy its leg to stop it from moving. Amaris said it would be easy, but she remembered that the enemies were using the golem to protect themselves. Zero replied that it was even better and told her to get away as fast as she could after destroying the leg. Confused, Amaris asked if they were running away. Zero corrected her, saying they were going to crush the golem. Amaris agreed to the plan and the two split up to attack the golem from different sides. The members of the Spirit Liberation Army panicked, wondering if the two were planning to encircle them. They attempted to bring back the golem, which immediately raced against Zero and Amaris. As they got close to the mages, Zero gave Amaris a signal. Without hesitation, Amaris destroyed the golem's leg in a single shot. Grace noticed the signal Zero had told her and Lily about earlier. The plan was for Zero and Amaris to stop the golem's movement, and then Grace would cast her hottest flames to engulf it. Fire consumed the golem and the intense heat could be felt by Zero. He quickly moved away to avoid getting burned. After Grace roasted the golem until it melted, Lily used her ice magic to create a massive block of ice, which she hurled once Zero and Amaris were safely out of range. The ice collided with the melting golem, causing a massive explosion that also affected the mages in the back. As the smoke cleared, Amaris asked what had just happened. Grace immediately checked if her sister Lily was alright. Lily, on the other hand, wondered if they had defeated the golem. However, the golem was still moving, though it was lying down. Just then, a mage emerged from the rubble, cursing at them. Without missing a beat, Zero struck the mage on the head with his mithril pipe and knocked him unconscious with a kick. In the end, the mage lost control of the golem, and the fight was over. Amaris pointed out how reckless the plan was. Lily asked what had happened to make the golem explode. Despite having basic knowledge of chemistry from Earth, Zero said he didn't understand much but expected that combining fire and ice would cause an explosion. Lily couldn't believe Zero had gone ahead with such an uncertain plan. The group soon reached the entrance of the temple, and Zero assumed the old woman would be inside. Lily reminded everyone to stay cautious, thinking that more members of the Spirit Liberation Army might be nearby. Zero agreed and entered the temple with the spirits. Suddenly they heard a loud knocking sound, and Grace cried out in pain. Zero was surprised and asked why she was bumping into things when there seemed to be nothing around. Grace said she didn't know what had just happened. Lily then discovered that there was an invisible wall stopping them from entering the temple, leaving Zero and the spirits both shocked and confused. He couldn't believe that the girls weren't allowed to enter the temple while he could. Then he remembered that the Great Wind Spirit had mentioned something about humans or spirits being unable to enter or leave certain places. The girls decided to search for another entrance they could use. Amorous told Zero not to move from where he was standing while they looked for another way in. As Zero stood there, he tried to figure out what to do, and the small spirits around him started urging him to go ahead. He apologized to the girls, saying that the spirits' needs were more important at the moment. Zero entered the temple alone, assuming that not only the Great Wind Spirit was inside, but also members of the Spirit Liberation Army. He pushed open a large door and saw the Great Wind Spirit along with a hooded figure. The boy seemed surprised to see Zero, since he had made sure to put up a barrier outside. Zero wondered who the boy was, but based on his clothes, he guessed the boy was from the Spirit Liberation Army. The boy quickly realized something and guessed that Zero was in front of him. For some reason, Zero felt his chest tighten, almost like it was about to burst. The boy told him to relax, saying they weren't enemies. He introduced himself as Kuya from the Spirit Liberation Army. Zero couldn't believe Kuya's calm attitude and pointed out that the same group had been causing trouble lately, even putting a bounty on his head. He couldn't believe Kuya had the nerve to say they weren't enemies. Kuya apologized, explaining that it was the council members who did that. However, he admitted that he would have been happy if Zero had been captured from the beginning. Zero could see that Kuya was the complete opposite of him. It was the first time he had met him, but for some reason he felt irritated just seeing him in front of him. He asked Kuya what he was doing at the temple. Kuya explained that he had come to make a contract with the Great Wind Spirit, but the old woman had refused, saying that great spirits couldn't form contracts with each other. The Great Wind Spirit added that they only moved along with the waves and didn't interfere with anything. Kuya felt disappointed when he heard that. Suddenly he remembered something and asked Zero if he could join the Spirit Liberation Army. Zero immediately refused and told him to leave because he wanted to speak with the Great Wind Spirit. Kuya thought Zero was cold, but he still wanted to explain their goal. Zero responded that his decision wouldn't change even if he listened. As the conversation continued, Zero finally realized why Kuya's presence irritated him. He noticed that Kuya was smiling, but his eyes were not. His eyes were those of someone who looked down on others. Kuya then revealed that their main goal was to free the spirits and control them. Zero became even more upset after hearing Kuya's words. He asked what Kuya meant by control when they were supposed to be freeing the spirits. Kuya agreed with him, while the Great Wind Spirit remained silent. Zero admitted that he no longer understood what was going on. Kuya then asked if Zero knew why the world had been in chaos recently, but Zero only responded with confusion. Kuya explained that the spirits were slowly disappearing from the world and revealed the main cause: a stone opposite to the usual black stone. Zero was shocked to see such a thing. Kuya went on to explain that it was called a magic stone, or a spirit egg, which would eventually be reborn as a spirit. Zero was surprised to learn that spirits could be reborn, and showed Kuya the black stone he had. He asked if it was related to what Kuya was talking about. Kuya was pleased that Zero had a black stone because it would make his explanation shorter. He explained that when spirits lost all their magic power, they would turn into black stones. It would take years for them to regain their magic power before they could return as spirits. Zero then asked if the spirit inside his black stone would return soon, and Kuya confirmed that it would once the stone turned transparent. Kuya also added that humans usually don't let the black stones recover. Instead, they use them inside magical tools or similar devices. Zero, confused, asked what Kuya meant by using the stones, since black stones were considered dangerous as they absorb magic. Kuya clarified that the black stones were in a dormant state, slowly absorbing magic to recover. Once they turned transparent, they were safe to handle. However, humans viewed these transparent stones as luxury items and extracted the magic from them. Since black stones were dangerous, humans often destroyed them. Zero then realized that humans were unknowingly killing the spirits. The Great Wind Spirit added that humans didn't even know the black stones would eventually turn back into spirits. Zero couldn't believe what he had just heard. If it were true, then the Spirit Liberation Army weren't the bad guys, as they only wanted to save the spirits. However, he was still troubled by how they wanted to control the spirits. Kuya had meant what he said. They planned to separate the people who could save the spirits and wouldn't allow anyone else, except those chosen, to make contracts with them. He claimed that only he and Zero could do this, as only those who truly loved the spirits would be permitted to bond with them. In doing so, fewer spirits would be killed, and the magical imbalance in the world would return to normal, bringing peace. Zero then asked what Kuya meant by the two of them managing the spirits. The Great Wind Spirit explained that both Zero and Kuya were loved by the spirits, which left Zero stunned. Kuya asked if Zero would help them. Zero finally understood why they had been trying to capture him alive. He realized that while they wanted to prevent the spirits from being abused and bring about peace, Kuya and the others actually sought to control the spirits to gain power over people. They wanted to rule the world. Zero stated that magic was vital to the world, and if its source was controlled, no one could stand against them. People would have to beg to make contracts with spirits. Kuya argued that the spirits would be saved this way. Zero retorted that this was just Kuya's assumption and questioned whether the spirits even wanted that. Realizing that their negotiation had failed, Kuya noted Zero's anger and acknowledged that forcing his beliefs on others was wrong. Kuya then told Zero to reach out if he changed his mind. Zero angrily told him to be quiet and declared that he would handle things his own way. He would create a world where spirits could live peacefully. After that, Kuya left. Zero felt a wave of frustration. The Great Wind Spirit then remarked that the world might support Kuya's method. She used her magic and instructed Zero to head north and meet the Great Water Spirit as the final step. A third bead appeared on his mithril pipe. The Great Wind Spirit assured Zero that he would soon understand his true power, and that his journey to meet them, the Great Spirits, was nearing its end. She told him to make his decision when the time came. Zero left the temple feeling more confused than before. The Great Wind Spirit had told him to head north next, but Zero didn't understand how he could leave the temple. The Great Spirit assured him he would be able to soon. Suddenly, the temple rumbled, and Zero realized the noise was coming from the entrance. He left the Great Wind Spirit behind. The old woman wondered what choice Zero would make in the end. When Zero returned to the entrance, he found Amorous holding her sword tightly at her side. Lily informed the princesses that the maggot had returned. Zero was shocked to see that the entrance was completely destroyed. Grace's ominous voice warned him to be ready for what was coming. Zero asked why the girls were being violent and what he needed to prepare for. Grace reminded him that they had told him not to wander off alone. Seeing Grace's serious expression, Zero realized he was in trouble. Even Amaris and Lily were angry and decided to punish him. Zero knew he had only one choice left. The girls watched as he skillfully dodged away, hoping to calm their anger. They didn't expect him to move like that, and they agreed to let him go if he really felt bad about his actions. In his mind, Zero thought he had won. However, Grace wasn't convinced. She asked him one more time if he truly felt sorry for leaving them behind. Zero insisted he was serious, but Grace doubted him. He apologized again and pressed his face to the ground. The spirits who had been watching the couple's argument closed their eyes, and when they opened them again, they saw Zero completely burnt out, while Grace looked cheerful. She suggested they should get going. Zero claimed that they should do something, but he wondered why Kuya was tied up near the entrance. Kuya felt worried that Zero wouldn't notice him at all. Amaris said they found Kuya hanging around, so she decided to break the barrier using magic. Kuya just laughed at how everything had turned out. Zero then asked why Kuya wasn't trying to escape after what he had said to him a little while ago. Kuya explained that he couldn't get out because of the barrier and didn't expect his friends to be unconscious. Zero couldn't believe that Kuya hadn't dispelled the barrier, even though he was the one who had set it up. Kuya sighed and reminded Zero that he was just like him. Zero was taken aback when Kuya confessed that he couldn't use magic either. Zero started to piece everything together in his mind. Amaris then interrupted and asked if the two knew each other. Zero said he met Kuya when he encountered the Great Wind Spirit and recognized him as someone from the Spirit Liberation Army based on his appearance. Kuya was surprised to learn that Zero was traveling with such beautiful companions. He began to praise the blonde beauty who had broken the barrier even though she had been a bit forceful. Amaris raised her sword and asked if she could kill Kuya. Zero stopped her and said they would eventually bury Kuya soon enough. Kuya was shocked and called Zero cruel and a heartless demon. Zero punched Kuya and demanded that he answer his questions. He asked Kuya if he truly wanted to save the spirits. Zero confessed that he couldn't stand Kuya and had been holding back from covering him in honey, burying him underground and sticking a hornet's nest on his face. The girls couldn't believe what they were hearing. Kuya asked Zero to refrain from doing such things. Zero then thought that Kuya's words weren't entirely wrong. Kuya became curious about Zero's sudden honesty. Zero said he hadn't fully decided yet and wanted to learn more about Kuya for the sake of the little ones. He then invited Kuya to join them to meet the Great Water Spirit. The girls were surprised by Zero's unexpected decision. Kuya found Zero very interesting and said there were no better options than what Zero had suggested. Zero gave him a smack and asked what Kuya's answer was. He wanted to know if Kuya really loved the spirits and was serious about saving them. Kuya admitted he didn't really know what would happen to the world if the spirits disappeared, but he wasn't heartless enough to hate the cute spirits. However, he wouldn't feel bad about using the spirits for his own benefit. Zero accepted Kuya's answer and called him a little brat. Although Zero was going about it differently, he understood that Kuya really wanted to save the spirits. Kuya insisted there was no guarantee that he would change his mind and that he might run away at any time. He didn't understand why Zero called him a little brat. The The girls were confused about what was happening, but Amorous understood that they were taking Kuya hostage. Lily suggested disciplining him, and Grace was ready to get rid of him soon. Zero didn't know what the future held for them, but he thought that if Kuya was like him, it would be better to team up for the sake of the spirits. The group then decided to head north next. Soon after, Amorous complained about how Kuya kept trying to escape. She also complained that Zero was too easygoing. Zero mentioned that the spirits were watching the area. Just then, Kuya's scream of pain echoed through the forest. Zero reminded Amorous that Lily had set up a lot of traps. A few days had passed since they met the Great Wind Spirit, and they were now heading toward a pond in the north. That was the plan, but Kuya kept slowing them down by constantly trying to run away. He ended up tied up like a worm, begging to be set free. Zero eventually released him and asked where he got his new clothes. Kuya explained that he couldn't keep wearing the same clothes from the Spirit Liberation Army. Lily then appeared and scolded Zero for untying Kuya, saying he would try to escape again. She asked if Zero had finally decided to bury him. Zero denied this, saying Kuya could still be useful. He said it was up to Kuya whether he ran away or not, and that even if he didn't do anything, someone else would be happy to take care of Kuya. Just then, Amorous appeared behind Kuya in a creepy manner. The next morning, Zero said it was better for Lily if Kuya stayed around. At breakfast, the princess enjoyed something delicious. Though it wasn't made by Lily or Zero, Zero gave Lily a thumbs up since she was always stuck with cooking. Annoyed, Lily said she still couldn't fully trust Kuya but took a bite of his food. Her expression changed, showing that it tasted good. Zero then said that Lily's cooking was still the best, making her flustered. She punched him in the stomach out of embarrassment. Holding a rope, Amorous couldn't believe Kuya could actually be useful. Kuya proudly claimed that he was good at driving a carriage and cooking. Zero noticed that the two of them acted like a master and pet. Still, Zero was glad someone else could cook and drive. Kuya then bragged that every girl dreams of a knight in shining armor. Everyone gave him a disapproving look. He insisted that he looked like a prince, so the comparison worked. He also claimed that men who could cook were popular with girls. He added that he could do house chores, which he said were his specialties. Amorous then punched him, and everyone realized he was completely useless in a fight. Grace then asked if their next stop was Zelly Pond in the north. Zero confirmed it, saying that the spirits had told him to go there to meet the Great Water Spirit. He wondered how long the journey would take by carriage. Amorous mentioned that she had been to Zelly Pond before for night training, and said they couldn't go there by carriage. The scene shifted to a muddy swamp. Zero complained about the terrain and asked if there was a way around it. Kuya said the only way was to walk and that it would take a month to reach the pond. Grace suddenly fell, realizing she couldn't walk through the swamp. Worried, Amorous told her little sister to stay behind, but Grace refused, insisting she could walk just fine. However, Zero noticed she was stuck in the mud. Suddenly, Kuya announced he would also stay behind because he didn't want his clothes to get dirty. Amorous pulled him into the swamp and asked him what he was talking about. Kuya asked to come along. Zero then wondered about Lily and the others. To his surprise, Lily was ready, wearing boots and pants. Zero stared at her for a few seconds and then turned away, trying not to laugh. Lily asked if he wanted to die. Shortly after, the group continued their journey through the swamp. Grace was clearly exhausted from the heavy steps she was taking. Amorous asked if she was alright, and Grace claimed she was different from her old self. Zero glanced back and thought it must be tough for Grace. Although she was stronger than before, she was still just a girl. He wondered if they could stop for a break soon. At that moment, Lily noticed something and told Zero to take a look. Zero was relieved to see a spot where they could rest. Kuya offered to help Grace, but she quickly waved him off. She then glared at Zero and asked him to help her. Zero gladly agreed. Amorous scolded Kuya for trying to charm her sister. With a sigh, Zero, being the only one left, decided to help Grace. Without any more delay, he picked her up in a princess carry and headed toward higher ground. A flustered Grace squirmed, and Zero told her to stop moving since it made it harder to walk on the uneven surface. Lily shouted that wasn't the problem. Suddenly, the ground shook and Zero and Grace tumbled down into the swamp. Zero asked what had just happened, and Lily told him there was something out there. It turned out the high ground they were heading toward was actually a huge snake resting in the swamp. Their situation suddenly escalated when a huge snake appeared. Kuya laughed out loud, mocking how they were like sitting ducks waiting to be eaten. Amorous smacked him on the head, telling him to shut up. The snake seemed startled by the scene. Zero then asked Grace if she was okay, but the clumsy princess had fallen deep into the swamp and couldn't move. Zero apologized for asking and began to wonder how they could fight the snake when they didn't even have solid ground to stand on. Suddenly, he had an idea and asked Lily to use her ice magic to freeze the swamp water. Lily exclaimed that she couldn't possibly freeze the entire area with her magic. Zero called her slow and explained that she only needed to freeze the ground where they stood so they could have firm footing. He asked if she could at least manage that, and the maid agreed. Zero then volunteered to be the decoy and keep the snake focused on him. Kuya agreed with the plan, calling it a great idea but suggested it would be better to freeze the snake instead of the swamp. Lily called him an idiot, asking if he even knew how much magic it would take to freeze such a large snake. She also pointed out that the snake could easily break free with its massive body. Kuya insisted she should at least try and offered to help. Reluctantly, Lily agreed with Kuya. She told Zero she would try to stop the snake's movements and asked him to take care of the dumb sisters. Zero complied and quickly helped Grace out of the swamp. Amarys then called out, excitedly saying she had found a spot where they could walk. The three of them gathered as Lily had instructed. Zero couldn't help but worry about whether Lily and Kuya would be okay. He thought it might be better if he fought the snake alone with his mithril pipe and took it down. Meanwhile, Lily asked Kuya if his plan would really work. Kuya told her to stay calm and hit the snake with her best ice magic. With his palm on Lily's back, she used her strongest spell called Freeze. Kuya's hand began to glow, and both Zero and Lily noticed something unusual. Lily and Kuya were suddenly surrounded by a glowing orb of light, and Lily's ice magic went wild, shooting toward the huge snake. Zero stood speechless as the snake was instantly covered in thick ice. What remained was the giant snake, now frozen solid like an ice sculpture. Lily was shocked, and Kuya started praising her. However, Lily couldn't believe she had done all that on her own. Zero agreed, realizing it wasn't just Lily's power, and suspected something about Kuya. Kuya noticed Zero staring and signaled him to stay quiet. Just then, Amarys shouted at them to move. Kuya, confused because the snake was already dealt with, asked what was wrong. Amarys explained that it wasn't about the snake, it was something falling from above. Huge chunks of ice began breaking off from the frozen snake. Terrified, Kuya crouched in fear while Amarys quickly ran toward them. Zero grew worried, but to his surprise, a familiar glowing orb appeared, shielding the three of them from the falling ice. Everything was chaotic, and Grace asked if her sister and Lily were okay. Amarys claimed everything was fine, except for Kuya clinging to her and feeling what needed to be felt. Zero and Grace were both startled. Kuya's scream of pain then echoed across the swamp. Everyone eventually made it out of the swamp. Amarys dragged Kuya around like a pet dog. Lily still couldn't shake off the powerful ice magic she had used earlier. Zero told her not to worry about it and focus on the fact that everyone had escaped safely. Lily insisted that she couldn't stop worrying, saying it wasn't normal. In his mind, Zero corrected her, thinking it wasn't her that wasn't normal, and he hadn't been wrong about Kuya either. Kuya reassured Lily, suggesting that the Great Water Spirit could help them understand what had happened. He then asked Zero to confirm. Zero clicked his tongue and said he couldn't say for sure. Grace noticed Zero seemed troubled by something. Zero claimed he was just tired and needed some rest. Before he left, Grace thanked him for saving her and wished him a good night. After that, Zero was supposed to meet the last Great Spirit, and then everything would become clear to him. However, he still had a lingering, gloomy feeling that he needed to confront. Once things were fully clear, Zero thought he might be able to let go of that. Soon after, the group reached Zelly Pond. Zero was happy to be meeting the Great Water Spirit soon. However, the first thing he saw was the princess, excitedly jumping into the water in her swimsuit. To his surprise, even Lily was joining the other girls. The girls enjoyed the cool water, washing their bodies as much as they could. Zero couldn't believe how carefree they were. But he had to admit it was a good idea to take a break before meeting the Great Water Spirit. Kuya then offered to help the girls, saying his hands were free. This angered Amarys, and she pointed her knife at his neck. Kuya quickly said he was just joking. Zero then pulled Kuya away, telling him they had something to discuss. Kuya protested, saying he wanted to join the girls. He jokingly assumed Zero wanted to spy on them and called him a maniac. Zero punched him, and Kuya apologized for messing around. Zero was starting to feel exhausted being around Kuya. Sensing something was wrong, Kuya asked what had been bothering Zero for the past few days. He guessed that Zero had already figured it out and asked him directly what was troubling him, adding that it was an honor after all. Zero couldn't answer and looked anxious. Kuya then wondered if Zero thought he had made a mistake about himself. When Zero looked away, Kuya was surprised to realize he was right. He couldn't believe that Zero, who was still unsure, had convinced him to join them. He found it funny in a way, but also regrettable. Zero felt frustrated, unable to respond back. Just then, the boys heard the girls shriek. They quickly ran back to the pond and froze when they saw the girls looking helpless, as the water seemed to be touching them inappropriately, like an old man's creepy hands. Grace complained about how strange the water felt. Amarys said the water was sticking to her body, and Lily asked Zero to do something about it. Zero had no idea what to do. Kuya suggested they just watch for a while or even leave the girls like that forever. Embarrassed and crying, Amarys threatened to kill Kuya. The pet, however, seemed pleased and gave the creepy water a thumbs up. Zero then hit Kuya and told him to stop joking and think of a way to deal with the perverted water. Just then, someone called Zero rude. Confused, Zero looked up, and water suddenly gushed out of the pond. Grace asked what was happening now. A beautiful woman appeared, walking on the surface of the water. The girls were captivated by her beauty. The woman praised them for coming and introduced herself as the Great Water Spirit. She mentioned it had been a long time since she had felt a young girl's skin. Zero couldn't believe he was meeting another perverted Great Spirit just like the first one. After meeting the other Great Spirits, the Great Water Spirit asked Zero and Kuya if they had made their decisions. Kuya spoke up first, stating that he wanted to rule over both humans and spirits for the sake of preserving the spirit's existence and to fix the world's magical disturbances. The Great Water Spirit was pleased to hear this final decision from the Great Light Spirit. Zero was startled upon hearing this, and the girls were equally shocked when the Great Water Spirit addressed Kuya as the Great Light Spirit. Amorous then asked Zero what was happening, confused about Kuya being a great spirit. It was now Zero's turn. He had already begun piecing things together. First, spirits couldn't use magic. Second, only Zero could touch the black stone. Third, he could pass through barriers that only spirits could pass through. And most importantly, he was the only one who could see the spirits around him. Despite knowing all this, Zero struggled to admit the truth. He didn't want to let go of something deep within him. The Great Water Spirit asked Zero again about his decision as the Great Dark Spirit. Zero already knew deep down that he had never been human in this world. The girls were shocked to learn that Zero had been a great spirit all along. Zero had suspected it himself but didn't want to admit it. However, as his journey went on, it became more and more obvious. Still, he wondered what great spirits actually were. He thought he would be like the smaller spirits in this second life, but instead he had the word great in front of his title. Amorous angrily demanded an explanation from Zero, saying she couldn't listen to such nonsense anymore. Frustrated, Zero snapped at her to be quiet, yelling that he was more confused than anyone. Plus, he couldn't keep calm with a beautiful older woman standing in front of him. The girls were shocked by what Zero was saying. They then decided to treat the Great Water Spirit like a boss monster they had to defeat. Zero stopped them and scolded them for complicating things. He also asked them to put on some clothes first. The Great Water Spirit, pleased to hear herself called beautiful, joked that she didn't mind being the fourth wife. Zero quickly clarified that's not what he meant. Kuya then asked the Great Water Spirit to marry him, but she wasn't interested. Finally, the conversation grew serious, and Zero asked the Great Water Spirit about him being another great spirit. He trusted that someone like her wouldn't lie without reason. Anxiously waiting for her answer, he glanced away. The Great Water Spirit smiled, understanding something, and began explaining about the Great Light and Dark Spirits. She said that the Great Light Spirit had been chosen from among the dead of this world, someone with the highest aptitude to repair the world. Zero couldn't believe that Kuya had actually been a dead person. Kuya angrily told him to stop the slander since he was clearly alive. The Great Water Spirit then explained that the Great Dark Spirit, chosen from the dead of another world, was Zero. Zero asked what she meant by the changes and wondered why he and Kuya still looked human. The Great Water Spirit explained that it was easier for them to blend into the human world, gather information, and ultimately make decisions. Kuya summed it up. They lived as humans but made decisions for the world as great spirits. The Great Water Spirit agreed, saying that the changes she referred to were exactly what the term implied. If the Great Dark Spirit was chosen from someone within the same world, that person would use the common sense of that world to improve it or even reshape that common sense. While this wasn't necessarily a bad thing, it was important to have different perspectives. This was why someone who wasn't confined by the common sense of that world was chosen, so they wouldn't be influenced by it. That person could make decisions based solely on their own knowledge, and that person was Zero. In short, the Great Light Spirit, Kuya, existed to help fix the world. Meanwhile, the Great Dark Spirit, Zero, was meant to change the world without being affected by its common sense. To understand the world better, they needed to appear human instead of in their usual spirit forms. Even though they were spirits, they looked like humans. Despite this, Zero still couldn't believe he was no longer human and just laughed it off. Grace, Lily, and Amaris seemed to be in pain and worried about Zero. The Great Water Spirit asked Zero again about his decision and offered to answer any questions he had. Zero thought it over. No matter if he was a human or a great spirit, he still wanted to save the spirits. He wanted to protect the little ones who had turned into black stones, but he did not want to disrupt people's lives and businesses like the old man he knew. Coming from a world without magic, Zero thought it would be acceptable for the people in this world to forget about magic and set the spirits free, but he realized that might not be the best choice. If he had not met the girls in this world, he would have had no hesitation in freeing the spirits. He would have separated the spirits from humans and erased magic from the world. Humans could live without magic just like people did back on Earth. However, Zero noticed that this world was different, and what made it beautiful was the existence of the spirits, which represented magic. He concluded that magic was the most precious thing in this world and wondered if it was right to destroy it to fix things. Zero clenched his fist and stumbled over his words. The Great Water Spirit saw that he was still unsure. Zero apologized, saying he felt like he already had the answer but couldn't fully understand it. The Great Water Spirit understood him but reminded him that time was running out. She asked him to think carefully before making his decision. Then she cast a spell on Zero's mithril pipe, and the last slot filled with a new bead. With this, the Great Water Spirit believed that the two great spirits of dark and light finally had the powers of all four great spirits. She said their final destination was at the center of the continent, beneath Orphan Castle. There they would be able to gain the power to make their wishes come true by offering the strength of the four great spirits. Zero was surprised that he had already found the last great spirit and her power. Kuya suddenly shouted in disbelief, not understanding how Zero had managed to gather them all. Zero confirmed that he had met all four great spirits, which meant his quest to find them was over. However, he then realized that Kuya had not met all of them yet. The Great Water Spirit reassured them that it was not a problem as long as one of them had completed the task. Kuya felt relieved, but the Great Water Spirit noticed something and warned him not to get ahead, since he still needed to go together with Zero. Kuya asked her not to invade his thoughts. Just then, Amorous appeared and tied Kuya up again. After the Great Water Spirit disappeared, Zero asked what was hidden beneath Orphan Castle. Grace said she had only heard about an underground altar where someone could communicate with the god, but they needed to offer the power of the great spirits. Zero wondered if the god Grace mentioned was the same glasses man he had referred to earlier. Suddenly they heard a horse neigh, and a soldier emerged from the woods calling out for Amorous. She asked what had happened since she had instructed him to protect her father. The soldier apologized and reported that the castle had fallen into the hands of the Spirit Liberation Army. Zero angrily demanded more information. Kuya exclaimed that it was supposed to be too soon for this. Amorous, furious, asked Kuya what he meant and if he had known about this from the start. However, even Kuya looked confused. Zero urged him to explain everything he had just said. Kuya admitted that he genuinely wanted to save the world, even if it meant the castle would be destroyed. Amorous could not believe what she was hearing. Kuya explained that his main goal was to liberate and manage the spirits. However, given the current situation, he could not fix the disturbance in the magic power. Zero then realized they wanted to start a coup, kill all the royals, and create a new government. After that, Kuya said he did not care what would happen to him, as long as he fulfilled his duty to fix the world's magic disturbance. Amorous angrily grabbed Kuya by the neck. He protested, saying it was still too early to capture the castle since the Spirit Liberation Army still needed either him or Zero for their plan. He argued that it would be reckless for the others to proceed without either him or Zero. Zero asked Kuya what he was talking about. Kuya explained that the Spirit Liberation Army was planning to lure monsters to attack the castle by gathering a lot of black stones at the royal castle. The girls felt confused when they heard that and asked what he meant. Kuya then asked the princess if they had noticed the strange monster nests near the capital, or if monsters that usually didn't attack people had started attacking. The sisters agreed, as they or their soldiers had experienced this. Kuya explained that the phenomenon was caused by the black magic stones stored beneath the royal castle. For humans, these black stones were dangerous because they drained magic, but for monsters, they were attractive and made them more ferocious. Zero now understood the Spirit Liberation Army's plan. Kuya confirmed that as more monsters appeared near the capital, more soldiers would be dispatched. This would reduce the number of soldiers protecting the king, which was when the knight captain and the minister, along with some soldiers, would take over the castle. However, Zero found it strange that they had gathered many black magic stones but wouldn't be able to control them since they drained people's magic power, and only spirits could touch them directly. Kuya then shared how the minister, who had once been a spirit researcher, discovered a black stone by chance. He claimed that a complete magic stone could prevent the black magic stone from draining one's magic power. He then gave Grace both stones and she freaked out, though she was fine afterward. Kuya explained that a complete magic stone was a rare type that people would often break into pieces to use as decorations. As long as they had such a stone, they could gather black magic stones without any issues. Lily then asked what they would do with the monsters after destroying the castle. That was the part Kuya was unsure about. Their original plan was to send the black magic stones to God, so with the black magic stones gone, the monsters should return to normal. That was why they needed either him or Zero to receive the power of the great spirits. He claimed it was too soon to execute the plan and assumed the castle had already been ransacked. The sisters called him cruel for having such a devilish plan. Kuya insisted he did not want that kind of thing to happen in the first place. That was why he needed to return to the capital as soon as possible. Zero then recalled how the world's magic power was distorted, with the center of it located beneath the castle. He punched his right palm with his left fist, creating a loud sound that stopped the others from talking. Zero claimed he couldn't do anything just by thinking and wondered if there would be a fight. Although he was surprised, he was confident he would win. The others did not understand what he was talking about. Zero then told them to move as it was time for them to strike back. Soon after, Amorous' underling stood shocked in front of a paved area while Zero and Kuya stood behind him. Amorous was amazed at how powerful the Great Spirit's abilities were. The soldier, who used earth magic, exclaimed that he should have had that level of magic from the start. However, he didn't know that the two boys standing in front of him were actually the Great Spirits of Light and Dark. Amorous told them to hurry and retrieve the carriage so they could head back to the southern village. Zero himself was genuinely surprised at how the soldier used earth magic to create a road through the swamp. He and Kuya kept supplying the soldier with magic power. He couldn't believe their power as great spirits was really that strong. He realized it made sense that the Spirit Liberation Army wanted their power, but he was curious why they decided to act sooner than planned. Kuya overheard him and said he couldn't answer that question. Zero remarked that he didn't know how many people were in the Spirit Liberation Army. With Amorous, Grace, and Lily away from the capital, the defenses were weak, making it the perfect time to strike. Zero also guessed that the others probably thought Kuya had betrayed them, which surprised Kuya. He remembered that the enemy's plan was to remove the royal family and take control of the shrine under the castle. Once they had the shrine, even if Kuya betrayed them, he wouldn't be able to cause any trouble at all. Kuya tried to explain that he wasn't a traitor, but a rope suddenly grabbed him and dragged him away. Amorous scolded him for being too slow. Slowly, Zero began to realize that Kuya was actually a good person. At the same time, Zero noticed Lily looking at him anxiously and asked what was wrong. She asked if he was truly a great spirit. Zero casually said that he was, after boosting the soldier's magic a moment ago. For now, he decided not to think too much about it. He mentioned that he had already died once and being reincarnated like the little ones wasn't so bad. Lily smiled, feeling relieved that Zero was okay. Zero thanked her for worrying, though Lily denied it. Soon, everyone arrived at a village in the carriage, but they still needed another day to reach the capital. Amorous suggested they rest for the night. Then soldiers appeared, calling out to Amorous and Grace, relieved to see that the princesses were safe. Amorous and Grace were happy to see the soldiers safe too. The soldiers apologized for failing to protect the king, despite their duty. Amorous asked how their father was doing. The soldiers explained that the king had barricaded himself in his private chambers. They couldn't believe that the minister and the captain of the chivalric order had started a coup. They shared their plan to rescue the king and take back the castle, asking Amorous to lead them. Amorous ordered them to gather for an emergency meeting. In the meeting, some soldiers exclaimed that a large number of goblins had swarmed the capital. They all argued that they would lose many men if they charged in. However, they were in a hurry because the king was in danger. Zero grew frustrated with their arguing and told them to be quiet. He had a general understanding of the situation, and Amorous asked if he had a plan. Zero said it was something simple and suggested they use the same method they used when escaping the swamp. He assumed that many soldiers could use earth magic. He proposed borrowing their magic to dig a large tunnel to the castle, which would allow them to enter both the castle and the shrine safely. Zero felt proud of his idea, but everyone looked at him with doubt and began to laugh. Angry at being ridiculed, Zero lashed out at them. Kuya then said it would be impossible. He explained that even though the great spirits could boost others' magic power, they would eventually run out of magic if they kept sharing it with too many people for too long. Zero hadn't considered this. Kuya sighed and said that, even with the help of spirits, someone like him who could only contract with 112 spirits, found Zero's plan unrealistic. Zero suddenly had a realization and wondered if he had heard Kuya correctly. He asked to confirm if their magic power increased the more spirits they contracted with. Kuya confirmed this and assumed that someone like Zero, who had only recently arrived in their world, wouldn't have many contracted spirits yet. Zero then casually mentioned the number 3,152, causing Grace to flinch. Kuya called it a small number but suddenly froze in shock. Zero explained that he was contracted to over 3,000 spirits, with the number still growing as new ones joined him. Just then, the spirits began to flood in, and Kuya couldn't believe his eyes. Zero smirked as more spirits joined him right at that moment. The soldiers began gossiping, saying they didn't trust Zero or his words. Grace overheard them and quickly switched into a protective wife mode. She shouted at the soldiers, claiming that she and her sister could vouch for Zero. She admitted that Zero's appearance was intimidating and even she had thought she would be killed the first time they met. However, she also knew there was no one in their world who cared more for the spirits than Zero. She added that while the humans of this world didn't understand how to save the spirits or the true goal of the Spirit Liberation Army, they couldn't ignore the wrong use of spirits to harm others. Grace explained how she and her sister hadn't seen much of the world until they met Zero. As Grace began to stumble over her words, Amorous smiled and stepped in to help. She said she felt the same and agreed that it was difficult to explain everything. She then asked the soldiers to trust Zero. One of the soldiers who had doubted him admitted that he trusted Zero after seeing his power, though he still thought Zero looked intimidating. Zero felt conflicted as everyone criticized his appearance right in front of him, but he was grateful they believed in him. Amorous then declared that they would follow Zero's plan to save the king and take back the castle. The soldiers agreed and followed her command in unison. While goblins swarmed around the capital, Zero and the others traveled underground. Grace praised him for creating a large tunnel to the capital in one go. Zero said the soldiers did most of the work, and he just lent them his magic power. Grace then asked if using so much magic had drained him, but Zero happily assured her that he was fine, explaining that the power of a great spirit was very strong. Kuya, however, silently watched Zero with concern. Soon the carriage stopped as they arrived at an underground cavern. They decided to continue on foot. Amorous had heard about the place before, but she was still surprised by how huge it was. She couldn't believe such a place existed underground. Amorous guessed that the enemies gathered their strength here because the altar was the most important thing to them, after Zero. She asked if they would be alright on their own. Zero said it was better for the soldiers to focus on saving the king, as that would ease the sisters' worries. The sisters were touched by his words. Zero then asked Kuya if he knew where the altar was. Kuya pointed out that it should be in the center and that they only needed to go straight ahead. He hoped they wouldn't run into trouble. Zero confidently said they wouldn't. At that moment, some enemies appeared. The girls had the same idea, launch a frontal attack. Surprisingly, for the first time, Zero agreed with them. He didn't stop them and even ordered the attack. The members of the Spirit Liberation Army began firing magic attacks. Zero gave Lily a signal. Zero's group got overwhelmed by the attacks and the enemies thought they had already won and moved in to capture the Great Spirits. However, their attacks were useless against Lily's ice wall, strengthened by Zero. The enemies couldn't believe that simple ice magic could block their fire magic. Zero told Lily to freeze everyone, and in an instant, something surrounded the enemies. The ice wall formed a capsule that trapped them. They tried to melt the ice but failed. Zero approached them and coldly explained that Lily's ice was mixed with his magic and wouldn't melt easily. The enemies realized how dangerous Zero truly was. The group continued traveling underground. Grace admired Lily's magic and said it would be her turn next. Amorous, the older sister, insisted she should go next. Lily proudly claimed she could handle everything without the help of the dumb sisters. Kuya anxiously asked Zero if he was okay after using so much magic power. Zero had just finished digging the long tunnel, and despite the spirit's magic, Kuya thought Zero wouldn't be able to keep going until the end. Zero knew this, but he said he would push through with sheer determination. Kuya replied that wasn't the point he was making. Zero then admitted that it was the first time he felt like he could do something for someone else. Kuya sighed and remarked that it would actually benefit him if Zero wore himself out. Zero then remembered that Kuya was actually their enemy. At that moment, Grace noticed something and called for their attention. Everyone saw the glowing altar in the center, the one that could connect them with the gods. Amorous shouted for them to wait as familiar faces appeared around the altar. The minister stood there looking threatening and called them foolish. Zero asked who he was and the minister angrily reminded him. He praised Kuya for bringing Zero and declared the start of the ritual, ordering Kuya to come over to their side. Everyone looked at Kuya, who admitted he had always been on the minister's side. He said he wasn't joking about doing what he wanted. The girls watched in concern as he walked away. He waved goodbye, thanking everyone for the fun journey. Zero glared at Kuya, furious over his sudden betrayal. The minister laughed wickedly and asked Kuya to lend him his magic power. He was disappointed that Zero and the others hadn't died at the hands of the lizard men. Grace and Amorous realized that the minister had assigned the quest to Grace with that very intention. However, he was also pleased that now he had the chance to get rid of them himself. With Kuya's help, the minister cast a sinister-looking spell. A portal opened and a monster emerged from it. Lily identified it as a demon summoning. Seeing the demon preparing to attack, Amorous warned everyone to be careful. The demon then breathed fire, much like Scheherazade using flamethrower. Zero quickly supported Lily and she created an ice wall. The minister watched the group being surrounded by flames and hoped they would burn to ashes. When the ice wall began to crack, Lily warned that her ice couldn't withstand a demon's fire for long. Zero said they couldn't win by just defending, even though his magic reserves were huge. He was also worried because Kuya was siding with the minister. At that moment, Grace asked Zero to lend her his power because she wanted to try something. Zero gave her a doubtful look, but Grace insisted, saying she believed she could do something about the demon. She admitted she had always felt useless, like a burden. She had set out on a journey to be recognized by someone, and Zero had been the first to see her potential. She exclaimed that she could use her fire magic, though Zero looked concerned for her. The minister laughed and asked what a useless princess could do. Zero got angry and shouted that he would give her a lot of magic power. He patted her on the back, telling her to give it her best shot. Grace took a deep breath to calm herself and said she would try. She asked Lily to step out of the ice wall. Amarys warned her sister to be careful. Grace knew she only had one chance and needed to focus more than usual. The minister tried to make his summoned demon's fire burn hotter. Grace was swallowed by the flames, but with Zero's power and the help of the spirits, she would be able to control the fire as if it were her own. She bravely grabbed the demon's flames. Zero was worried, but nothing bad happened as Grace easily tamed the fire. The minister was shocked, and even Grace was surprised. Zero and Amarys came to help. The minister doubted that Grace could control the demon's flames. Grace told him not to underestimate her because she was a fire magic user with power from the Great Dark Spirit. However, she was actually the most surprised of them all. The minister ordered Kuya to give him more magic power because he didn't want to lose to the useless princess. Kuya claimed he had run out of magic power. While the minister looked confused, Kuya praised him as the greatest mage in the world. After some time, Kuya finally set his own plan in motion. He showed the minister a familiar black stone and asked him what it was. The demon that had been summoned disappeared due to the lack of magic power. Kuya then revealed that it was Zero's black stone and confessed he had borrowed it. Zero remembered Kuya tapping his back earlier, realizing that must have been when he stole it. Kuya admitted that stealing was his specialty. The minister cursed him for betraying him, but Kuya told him not to take it the wrong way, saying he wasn't betraying anyone. He reminded the minister that he only did what he wanted. The minister became furious, and his face turned red as if his blood pressure was rising. Zero, annoyed by the old man's yelling, smacked him on the head. The girls helped tie up the unconscious enemies. Zero asked if they should chase after those who had run away. Amarys told him not to worry, saying that the soldiers would catch them, and without the minister's power, the enemies wouldn't be able to do anything. Amarys then noticed something and told Zero to look behind him. Zero turned and saw Grace sparkling with an expectant look on her face. He praised her at first, calling her amazing, but it didn't seem enough, so he kept complimenting her until he ran out of things to say. Grace scolded him, saying it was the perfect moment for him to propose to her. Zero, annoyed, asked if she wanted to get herself killed. Kuya couldn't help but smile as he watched the two. He told them to stop flirting and reminded them of how helpful he had been. Suddenly, Amarys saw Kuya get slashed on the back. Zero saw it too and rushed to him. A familiar deep voice then said he had expected Kuya to betray them. He added that he wouldn't kill Kuya just yet. Amarys had expected the Knight Commander to show up. She decided to drop his honorary title and simply called him Gomless. Gomless was impressed to see Amarys getting along well with the others. Kuya tried to say something, but Zero told him to stop talking because he was going to treat him with medicine from the spirits. Just to be sure, Kuya reminded Zero that the man in front of them was Amarys' superior and the Knight Commander. However, Zero didn't remember him at all. Amarys angrily asked why Gomless was trying to overthrow the royal family. Gomless claimed it was to protect the world in his own way. He explained that although he was part of the Spirit Liberation Army, he thought differently from them. He said he wanted to cut the connection between humans and spirits. Zero was shocked to hear this. Gomless claimed that if humans stopped relying on magic and magic stones for everything, the spirits would stop disappearing. Grace asked why, and Gomless revealed that he wasn't very good with magic. He worked hard to rise through the ranks with only his sword skills until he became the Knight Commander. However, he struggled against the minister who had several contracts with spirits. When Gomless learned what was happening with the spirits and the great spirits, he came up with a new plan, to create a pure world ruled only by power without the spirits' influence. Zero then joked that a gorilla wanted to be in charge of everything. Gomless called him smart, but suggested that this was also Zero's wish. He pointed out that such a world would stop humans from relying on spirits for magic. Zero suddenly felt conflicted. Amarys told Gomless to stop his nonsense, but she immediately froze under his pressure. Gomless told her not to be so quick to act and suggested she look closely around their feet. Zero suddenly felt scared when he saw the scattered black magic stones on the ground. He said they were the same stones he had gathered to lure the monsters. He added that he wouldn't dare challenge the Great Spirits without a plan. He explained that if they used magic, they might break the stones or even the altar. However, none of that mattered to him. He lifted his sword and stabbed a black stone near his foot, smashing it into pieces. Zero was struggling to control his anger. Suddenly, Amorous shouted, telling everyone to step back. She asked Grace to take care of Kuya while she dealt with Gomless. Gomless praised her decision, saying she was the only one who could face him as an equal. Amorous claimed it wasn't her fault for not stopping Gomless before the situation got this bad. Gomless gritted his teeth as Amorous charged at him with her sword, which he happily blocked. Zero was shocked by the sudden fight. The two knights clashed swords repeatedly. Gomless commented on how much Amorous had improved. Zero was amazed that Amorous could hold her own against Gomless, who looked like a gorilla. At the same time, she fought carefully to avoid breaking the nearby black stones. Zero never realized Amorous was that skilled. Grace explained how Amorous had once seen Gomless as a mentor, and she seemed furious with herself. It was the first time Grace had seen her older sister act this way. The two continued to argue. Amorous asked why Gomless was doing something so foolish. Gomless replied that he was just fixing the problems the royal family had ignored. Amorous didn't believe him and assumed that Gomless only wanted power over everyone. Gomless argued that there was nothing wrong with that, since the royal family was doing the same thing. Offended, Amorous charged at Gomless. Her strike was so strong that even the large-bodied Gomless was knocked back. He fell to his knees and Amorous demanded that he surrender so she could spare his life. Gomless stayed silent for a moment before commenting on how much Amorous had changed. Suddenly, Zero warned Amorous not to let her guard down. She hadn't expected Gomless to attack without his sword. Gomless didn't hesitate and punched Amorous, sending her flying toward the altar, where she touched several black stones. Amorous screamed in pain as her magic was drained from her body. Gomless remarked that in the past, Amorous wouldn't have hesitated to stab him to death. He claimed she had grown soft. Just as Gomless was about to finish the fight and kill Amorous, Kuya bravely stepped in and took the heavy blow. Gomless was surprised to see him still moving and admitted he hadn't expected that from him. Kuya agreed, saying he wasn't acting like himself. Zero called out to Kuya, who thanked everyone for healing him and apologized for breaking his bones this time. Kuya now looked frustrated. Gomless assumed Kuya couldn't move anymore and that the rest of them had no way out. He then approached Zero and suggested they work together. He said it wasn't a bad offer for Zero. Zero angrily told him to be quiet. He asked if Amorous was okay, and Kuya reassured him that she had only passed out after her magic power was drained. Zero then asked Kuya to give some of his magic power to Amorous. He also told Grace and Lily to use the spirit's medicine to treat their injuries. He tossed his mithril pipe to Lily and asked her to hold it. Grace suddenly became concerned when Zero started taking off most of his equipment. Clenching his fist, Zero said the old man in front of them deserved a good beating. Even the earth spirit on his shoulder seemed ready for a fight. Gomless doubted that a kid like Zero could do anything. Zero then explained how he had been unbeatable in his previous world and didn't feel like he'd lose to an old man like Gomless. He said he would give him a taste of an old-school fight. Gomless couldn't believe he was being underestimated, but admitted that he was interested in Zero from the start. He said he only needed one great spirit, so he'd accept the challenge of beating Zero to death. Zero was happy that Gomless fell for the bait. Since he couldn't fight like Amorous and as a last resort he could break the black stone, a fistfight seemed like the best option. He assured the nearby spirit Gomless doubted that Zero could defeat him. He told them to surrender if he won, and Zero agreed without hesitation, shocking the others since they weren't consulted. Gomless charged forward, shouting that Zero would regret his decision. Zero smirked and used a sand attack. The others were surprised that Zero used a dirty move, but he was proud of his Pokemon-like tactic. He claimed he would win, but Gomless wasn't affected by the sand and landed a punch on Zero's stomach. Zero felt the hit but quickly countered with a punch of his own. Gomless was surprised and realized that Zero hadn't lied about being experienced in fighting. Zero was shocked that his dirty trick didn't work. Gomless said he had fought many cowards who tried the same thing. Zero felt insulted by being called a coward but admitted it was true since he wasn't a knight with chivalry. The two continued trading punches while Grace watched with concern. Zero felt the impact of each of Gomless's heavy punches. Gomless told him to give up, but Zero refused because he was determined to do anything to achieve his goal. Gomless then praised Zero's way of thinking. Lily exclaimed that it was a one-sided fight. Zero's knees buckled and Gomless saw that Zero couldn't keep going much longer. However, Zero noticed something and smirked. As Gomless tried to land the final blow, Zero suddenly sprang up like Mario and headbutted Gomless in the chin. The surprise attack clearly injured Gomless. Angry this time, Gomless extended a blade from his gauntlets and stabbed Zero. Grace could only watch helplessly. However, a loud sound echoed underground as the blade broke, leaving everyone confused, including Gomless. Zero sighed in relief as he revealed the stone axe he had from the very beginning, which had blocked the blade. He was glad it hadn't broken despite enduring Gomless's punches. Grace couldn't believe that Zero still had the axe from Chapter 1. Gomless was clearly offended and claimed Zero still wouldn't win with such a weak weapon. Zero called Gomless an idiot and said it wasn't just about the weapon. He then asked Lily for his mithril pipe, saying he'd use a weapon since Gomless started using one. Gomless mocked him for not using a weapon from the start. Zero explained that he'd avoided it to stop Gomless. While Gomless couldn't move much while punching Zero, the spirits had already cleared away the black stones. Gomless looked to the side and saw the pile of black stones. Furious, he began cursing at Zero. Pointing the mithril pipe at the knight, Zero said Gomless had stolen his lines. Gomless called Zero a coward. Zero reminded him that he wasn't an honorable knight but simply a delinquent. Everyone watched in silence as Zero beat up Gomless as easily as stealing candy from a child. Soon after, Amorous wondered if Zero had any self-respect. Even Lily looked disgusted and felt sorry for Gomless. Zero was shocked by their reactions, while Grace, his self-proclaimed wife, remained supportive. Zero declared that the results were all that mattered and he didn't care if people thought he was a coward. Kuya then reminded them of their main goal. Zero agreed that they had finally reached the end of their journey. The two stood in front of the altar but had no idea what to do next. Zero decided to offer the mithril pipe, which was filled with the power of the great spirits. Unsure of how to make the offering, he struck the altar with the pipe. To his surprise, the altar accepted the offering and the entire underground area lit up brightly. Zero soon woke up and he and the rest of the group found themselves back in the library from the first chapter. The girls wondered if this could be the place where the gods lived. Zero and Kuya found the place familiar, recognizing it as where they had been transported immediately after they died. At that moment, someone called out to Zero. It turned out to be the four great spirits. They hadn't expected Zero to hit the altar with his pipe and were surprised, but they admitted that this was typical of Zero's personality. With the great water spirit leading, she asked what the answers from the great spirits of light and dark would be. Kuya declared that he still had the same answer as before, but this time, he felt conflicted. He wanted to hear Zero's answer first. Someone else agreed, saying it would be better to listen to Zero first. Then, a familiar man greeted Zero. Zero was surprised to see the man with glasses again, whom he called Four Eyes. The girls asked Zero to explain what was going on, and who the man was. Zero casually revealed that the man with glasses was God. However, the man with glasses claimed the opposite, saying that it was only Zero who called him that. He then wanted to return to the main topic and explained that Zero and Kuya could only use their powers once in the library, which would change the world. They could either become the rulers of the world or create a world for spirits. If they wanted, they could even erase humans if they deemed them unimportant. Zero realized he could do whatever he wanted, and the man with glasses confirmed it. He remembered Kuya asking to hear Zero's answer first. Kuya asked if Zero had found his answer during his journey, and Zero confirmed that he had. Coming from a world without magic, Zero understood that humans could live without it. However, on his journey he noticed the world's beauty, which might have only been possible thanks to the spirits. Without magic, humans would turn to technology, but that would harm nature and eventually lead to the world's destruction. As Kuya had said, if they freed all the spirits and allowed the people with magic to control them, they might be able to protect the spirits. But Zero knew that the spirits didn't really care who controlled them and would make contracts with anyone. He realized that the smaller spirits might have preferred making contracts with humans, since they showed themselves during the process. Zero thought it would be wrong to force the spirits into contracts with only the chosen people, so he suggested doing it in rotation. Kuya asked what Zero meant. Zero explained that they could first separate the forest of the spirits into another world, and when a spirit exhausted its power and turned into a lackstone, it would automatically be transported to the separated forest of spirits. Once the spirits regained their power and transformed back, they would return from the forest to the world. Kuya then considered confiscating all the magic ore and everything else that used it. Zero agreed that the broken stones couldn't be restored, despite the spirits wanting to reunite. Zero said things would be easier this way and spirits wouldn't be forced to make contracts with just anyone. Lily tried to argue that the plan was impossible, but the man with glasses insisted it could work. He seemed excited and reminded Zero that as the Great Spirit he could do anything. Zero then asked for Kuya's opinion. Kuya said it was a great idea and agreed that Zero cared too much for the spirits. The man with glasses then mentioned there was a catch. Someone needed to watch over the story as it unfolded. He suggested that Zero stay behind in the Forest of Spirits, saying the spirits liked Zero, and without him, they wouldn't be able to return to the human world on their own. Zero had expected there would be a downside. Without hesitation, he agreed to the man with glasses' suggestion. At that moment, Grace interrupted, asking Zero not to go. Grace exclaimed that it wasn't right for Zero to stay behind. Zero argued that no one else would do it, and he was the one who suggested the idea in the first place. Grace cried out again, insisting that Zero still shouldn't go. The man with glasses pointed out that the 4 great spirits had their own duties, leaving only the great spirits of light and dark as options. Grace tried to argue more, but Kuya interrupted. He said he didn't mind going, but he knew Zero, with his magic power, wasn't the best choice. Amorous stayed silent, and Grace was shocked. Zero scolded Kuya for saying unnecessary things and warned him to stop or else he'd beat him up. Kuya ignored the warning and continued. He explained how Zero had been using his own magic ever since he discovered he was a great spirit. Instead of relying on the contracted spirit's magic, Zero only used them to increase his magic pool, which was why he looked more worn out than before. Grace and Lily were surprised, but Amorous seemed like she had already guessed it. Zero cursed under his breath. Kuya reminded them that no spirit had turned into a black stone, even though Zero had used a lot of magic on their journey back to the capital. Grace then said that Zero would be all alone, but they quickly realized that with his wide smile he still had the spirits with him. At least Zero felt like he wasn't truly alone. Lily remembered that Zero was new to their world and hadn't even had the chance to enjoy it. She couldn't believe he was willing to go alone to the other side. Zero agreed, admitting that it would be lonely. When the girls asked why, Zero explained that the spirits had saved him when they first met, and he wanted to repay the favor. He patted Grace and Lily on their heads while apologizing. Finally, the girls broke down in tears, having held them back for so long. The man with glasses admitted that he was glad he had chosen Zero from the very beginning. However, Zero wanted to make sure to explain everything next time. He also called out to Kuya. Despite his suspicions, Zero asked Kuya to take care of the spirits still lingering in the human world. Kuya promised he would. Zero then asked Amorous to help Kuya with his duty, saying Kuya was too weak to handle it alone. Amorous smiled and assured Zero to leave everything to her. Next, Zero approached Lily, who was still crying. He asked her not to cry because it wasn't like her. He told her to keep watching over everyone as she always did. Lily cried even harder, saying she wasn't good enough to be relied on. Zero couldn't help but laugh a little. Finally, he turned to the last person, but Grace didn't want to listen and wouldn't let Zero go. Zero told her that it was thanks to her that he had come this far and changed so much. He sincerely thanked her and, for the first time, called her by her name properly. His words broke Grace and she cried even more. She said it wasn't fair for Zero to say something like that and then leave. Even her little spirit was crying. Zero apologized and also thanked the spirits who had been with him during his time in this new world. He wished for them to lend their strength to the people here. With a determined look, he told the man with glasses to go ahead and do what he needed to do. The man used his powers and a familiar hole opened up beneath Zero's feet. Zero couldn't believe he had fallen for the same trick twice. He couldn't help but curse at the man with glasses. A year later, Grace decided to embark on another journey. After returning from the previous year's event, she discussed everything with her father, the king. As a member of the royal family and a person seeking growth, Grace concluded that she needed to explore the world to understand it better. Although she wasn't sure exactly how she could help, she wanted to do something to make the world a bit better. Meanwhile, Amorous was still leading Kuya around, maintaining their usual dynamic of master and pet. Kuya often complained about being tired, but his excuses were meaningless to Amorous, who knew he was a powerful great spirit. She dragged him along, teasing that he was useless without her. Amorous had become the captain of the Night Order, and her fan club had started to grow jealous of Kuya. As for Lily, she had grown a little over the past year, and often complained about how slow Grace was with her preparations. Despite this, Grace still stood taller than her. The two girls traveled together, and at the end of each journey, they would always visit the Forest of Spirits, where Grace had first met Zero. During their latest visit, they were surprised by a sudden increase in the number of goblins. Lily exclaimed that it felt just like their previous encounter in the forest. Grace, out of breath, admitted she had no magic power left after their travels, and Lily quickly suggested that they run away. Suddenly, someone patted Grace on the back. In surprise, she unleashed a powerful fire magic that burned all the goblins in front of them to ashes. Lily asked what kind of magic it was. As the smoke cleared, someone greeted them, happy to see they were doing well. The girls turned around and saw a carefree Zero. Shocked, they asked why he was in their world. Zero explained that he had overdone things and ended up with a lot of spirits on the other side. Since they had sensed the magic of the world being disturbed again, he came. The girls couldn't believe the same thing was happening again. Zero then said he needed to travel around the world to fix the current problem. He was happy to meet the girls at the right time and invited them to join him on another journey. Grace, confused, asked why they were included. Zero replied that there was no one else who could go because they had made a promise. Blushing, he quietly reminded Grace of their promise to travel together. Grace also blushed, happy that Zero remembered. She excitedly said she would follow him forever. Lily called her unfair and said she would go with them too. Zero was happy to hear that. With the spirits following, Zero asked the girls to take care of him. And so Zero's story ended and began again. This little spirit waves goodbye to our dear listeners, readers, and viewers. Thank you for following the series until now.